it a tree that came down?
So yeah, on I don't know if
Is
it
that
was
one of the,
Sandy
like,
Walsh or the
e-displays?
Hurleys. They have the shared
I don't
driveway
think I've
right
seen
after us.
the, like, because it looks like the
A
old
tree
Kindle.
came down and
This
but
is
we
a
heard the
remarkable
cool
variety
that,
of
like went flying out of bed. And Chris said it was a transformer. So when
That's what it sounded like,
Yeah,
so
when
I figured,
Yeah.
when's the power going out?
So then my neighbor called.
Just
me and
literally
said,
an
"Is the
electronic
transformer
notepad."
all
Yes.
okay?"
That's
And she
great.
goes,
And
"No,
it
it's
can
a tree
convert,
that
if I'm
came
on
down."
Wi-Fi,
So I'm
it
wondering
can
if the tree
convert it to
fossil through
text,
a
and I can
transformer.
send it as a
But they,
PDF.
I reported it at like 6:40. And
Oh, we're on
we
air.
were around, we were back
We're
in
on the
2
air.
hours.
We're on,
That's good.
on air.
Thank goodness.
I'm gonna make sure everybody that needs to be here is here right now. We've got a quorum. There he is.
Recording in progress.
Cool. We're going to go ahead and start. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will be able to be found on the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel within 24 hours after the meeting. The following information is provided for members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely, visit the link, or from a telephone, dial the toll-free number and enter webinar ID 886-7389-1095. If you have not registered with Zoom, you will be asked for your name and email address. This meeting and hearing will be held in person at the location provided on this notice. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting and hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast, unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with particular interest in any specific item on this agenda should make plans for an in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. And we'll move on to roll call, starting at the end of the table over there.
Oh, Debbie Lincoln, Council on Aging.
Pete Lincoln, PAC.
Carol Ashambo, School Committee.
Kim Duffy, member at large.
Karen Menard Parks.
Tim Wilsmer, Planning Board.
Joe C. Gilchrist, member at large. And we'll move on to Zoom.
Lou Franco, Select Board.
Jerry Reed, citizen.
And that is it. All right, and we'll move on to public comment. We actually have a couple of our members that have to leave early, and I'm going to let them comment at the end of the table here. Is there anything that you want to start with as a public comment? Okay. All right, we'll go on with you.
Okay, thank you. So it says, it's great that you handed out this Master Plan Steering Committee charge, because I was reading it and I noticed that it says 6 members at large appointed by the Planning Board, and I had also noticed that they had said there was only 1 vacancy, and
They
if
were
I'm counting right, I thought we had more than that, so I
they
just...
were incorrect, and I
Okay, I just wanted to check on
brought that to their attention after.
Thank you. Okay, so, all right, so that's
We
already
have,
taken care of.
to be clear, we have 2 member-at-large vacancies and
Right.
1 vacancy. We need somebody on the Zoning Board of Appeals, which I've also reached out to. So,
Thank you.
yes.
All right. I do pay attention. Also, when Pete went to get sworn in downstairs, and I went with him because I had been negligent and noticed that I had not gotten sworn in. And we checked with Ellen, and the folder was empty other than Kim. So I don't know if that's...
I didn't.
Yes, so I think we're all sort of not operating properly, so I
Do
thought
we
I'd...
have to get sworn in if we're appointed from another committee?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
I guess we're all going down to town hall next week.
Well,
Yeah, so that was brought to my attention, so I think we all need to get sworn in. So that's my comment.
So,
We need to get sworn into this committee
oh,
in
yes.
particular.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. And we'll do that. I've suggested that there be a town-wide educational session and training for committees and boards on how to run a meeting, because you're just kind of sworn in, then what next? Or you're told that you're chair, and then what next? So you got to watch a bunch of meetings to prep yourself for, anyways. So I'm going to work on that and get that going so that this doesn't happen again. But no, I was not sworn in. Neither were several of us. So let's do that.
So I'm finished, thank you.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, Michael Ray. We're going to move on to the discussion of a public gathering space. And I had sent Michael Ray a couple emails with a list of questions that we've collected. So I have those papers kind of in between each chair up here, and the three of us can share. We'll start with the,
Josie, sorry, this is
Yeah.
Rami, can I interrupt you a second just to ask you to let Fortini into the
thank you
room?
so much.
Do you want to pass it down? We can share. We can share.
Evan, can I get your name for roll call, please? Can you say that, please? Evan's on mute, but Evan Waters is here. Okay. Fantastic. All right, so we sent Michael Ray several questions, actually a lot of questions, and he's graciously given his time to come here and talk to us about a reoccurring topic that's been brought up throughout the master plan process, is a gathering space for residents of Lunenburg. Okay, that's not us. So I've sent these questions to Michael Ray in advance. Could you please provide a list of town-owned properties and supporting geographical notes? He's given us maps. That's at the table. And I'm going to ask you to provide some notes about the town properties that you have in mind. And then I think that the next question probably loops into that too, that you could probably share, is what has the town recently discussed regarding these properties? Is there currently anything in the works? Does the town have a vision already for these properties?
All right, well, thank you for having me. I'm Michael Ray Jeffries, 1170 Massachusetts Avenue. And if I can just go back to something that was previously stated. So the select board recently, I know this board was created by the planning board, but the select board recently updated its appointment policy, and it gives some pretty good guidance for what to do when you become an appointed member of a board, such as getting sworn in, and a series of other steps. And with the town manager, we've also been working on a handbook for all boards and committees that just gives more clear guidance on kind of what the different roles are, reorganizing. So I think that, just to that previous conversation, we do have a working draft, and hopefully we'll be finishing that. We're floating it through all the other boards and committees over the coming months, and with the goal of it being finalized by the end of the summer. And so I think that would help.
Yes.
Because I think we recognize that, as people step up, that there's a need.
Well, thank you for recognizing it, and that's
Yeah.
going to be great.
So,
Super helpful.
to the questions that you have, and if you don't mind, I may kind of run through several of them, because I think there's a little bit of overlap between them. So, as a member of the select board, what I've provided you today is only really two properties that are underneath the select board, and the third one is actually underneath the Parks Commission. So there's quite a bit of properties in town that are under the care and custody of the select board. Most of them are relatively small parcels. Many larger parcels have been transferred to the Conservation Commission over the last 5 to 10 years roughly. But there's kind of two really big ones that remain. So on the first page of your handout, what I'm showing is roughly, I believe this is 100. No, I think this is a 60-acre parcel, 60-something acre parcel, and this is in the Whalum area. So just to orient you to I'm sorry, let me correct myself. The first page you're looking at is a 111-acre parcel that's near the center of town. This is the former Woodruff property. So as you see from the map, that there's multiple ways to get into this property. So you can see that and I'm going to always get that road wrong, Fairview. So you can see that it touches, there's access, two different access, really three access points on Fairview. However, this really goes between people's homes. I think for the most part, if you drive down the road, most people, it's going to look like people's lawns until you get to that bigger entrance toward the end where the DePerry family lives. And then there's also another access on Leominster Road, and this is near where the well is located. So if you come in off that, where we have that well on Lancaster right before the split, and you enter that way, so it's a pretty significant parcel. Most of it is wooded. If I had to estimate, there's probably a good maybe 30, 40 acres or so that's not wooded. I know Josie and I walked it. I believe the intent this year is for there to, in the years past, there's been farming activity on the properties, and that, kind of just happens. I'm expecting that that's probably going to happen again this year. So this is one property that, again, is under the care and custody of the Select Board. We don't have disposition for the properties that are under the care and custody of the Select Board. So it's something that I've brought up for the last couple of years to try to encourage the Select Board before transferring more property to Parks or Conservation, that we need to have a good vision for why we're holding this property. If we think, fast forward a couple hundred years, that, where there's going to be a need for probably a future school, there's probably going to be a need for annex for fire or police around town. Again, fast forwarding a couple hundred years. So we do need to identify why we're holding it, but for now, we don't have a disposition for it. So this property is a bit hilly toward the back end of it, but the front portion of it, where it's closer to the roads, again, it is at an incline, but there are some good areas there. The next page that I have, and this one's not colored, but I did try to highlight for you the two parcels I want to bring your attention to. So the first one on your map is...
Michael Ray, I have a quick question.
Sure.
I'm wondering if we can maybe, because the people on Zoom can't see these images, and I'm wondering if, Kim, if you would be able to look up the Lunenburg GIS and maybe look up these properties and share your screen so that they can see them.
All right, yeah, if you go to the town website, it's going to be under the assessor department. And then on the left-hand side of the web page, you'll see where it says GIS maps. I think it's a couple clicks to get into it.
Conveniently, I'm already on that page on the website. It's funny the things you go, and under assessor's office, where did you say it was?
So this is the Woodruff, if you type in like select
Vision cards.
board or, not the vision card, the one above the vision card.
There's tax information.
She's,
May I
am not in
step
the
on
right
this?
spot.
I don't know where you are.
Oh, I'm in the documents under.
Yeah, so just go to boards and commission, departments rather.
Yep, departments.
And then assessor. And then over on the left, it will say online GIS and property data.
And then it should be two things on that next screen. You hit the top one that says GIS.
Oh.
Yep.
Online map?
Yep.
Okay.
So if you type in select, because some things say select board, some things say board of selectmen. So if you just type in select, that's usually the quickest way
Okay.
to sort.
It's loading.
You're connected to the net, right?
I have my hotspot on. Okay.
Sorry, Kim, I just need to watch and make sure nobody's waiting in the room, so.
Oh, no worries. Select board. Okay. Yeah, it has a whole string of properties on the left, so. Which one do I select?
Is there any identifying on the?
No, I
So
didn't.
what's the next property we're
Yeah,
gonna-
I think the next one I want to draw your attention to, if you go to the Whalum area and you look along West Street and Pleasant,
Okay.
so on your maps, as I've printed them, the first one that I want to talk about is identified as parcel 26. I also circled it for you.
Thank you.
So this is the corner of Pleasant Street.
It's gonna be,
I just wasn't sure if you guys were following. All right, so this is off of Pleasant Street. So when you come up the hill and right where you have that farm and there's that sharp turn, as you can see, this is a 40-acre parcel that is under the care and custody of the Select Board. There is, we do have access that's really between two homes. And so it's limited access to get into it, but this is a very large field. It's not wooded at all. I believe we have a very tiny section of maybe a handful of trees right in the middle of it, but it's a pretty clear parcel, and it's connected into a bunch of other large parcels.
Are we looking at the one on Pleasant Street right now?
Yes.
Okay. The one marked Pleasant Street under Select Board.
And if I just look the second way,
No.
don't think we're looking at the same thing yet.
There isn't. Right here, right here. Right here, this little piece right here.
Yeah, it changes when you look at it on your version. So,
Try to
yeah.
get in.
Where is it? On, next to 13.
So, Michael, Ray, this is the property that you and I walked.
Yes.
The second one, I think?
Yes.
First
I
one.
think this was the first one you and I
Yes.
walked. Yep.
And then you had mentioned public transportation or some way to manage the traffic, or what am I remembering that incorrectly?
No,
Is
yeah,
that-
I think you are, but if I can come back to that, if that's
Sure.
okay, Josie.
Yeah.
And just so I can mention while we're here, the other property that I
Yeah.
wanted to bring your attention to, which I've also circled on your maps, and is identified as number 8. This is I believe a 56 or so acre parcel. Now, this one is fully wooded. It's fully wooded. It's a pretty wet and different areas parcel. It also connects to the backside of many people's homes. We have a lot of abutters on this property. It's mostly walking trails. This property would need some development in order for it to be utilized. However, it touches many different roads. So it touches West Street, it touches Whalum Road, and it also touches Pratt. So there's multiple ways to get into it, but again, all of that is between people's homes. There's no direct roads. So for the purposes of what I believe that you're looking for, I've also added in a third parcel that's under the care and custody of the Parks Commissioners, and we call this the Table Rock or Saliba property.
Northfield Park.
Say again?
The Parks Commit, so that Saliba property, which is what this piece of property was part of, is now, it's divided in two. So the Table Rock Saliba property is under conservation, and what they're calling Northfield Park, that's what the sign says, is what's under Parks Commission.
Okay. So this is a property that's under Parks. It is a little more flat than the other ones that I've presented to you today. There's good access on Northfield Road to get into it. And so this one seems to be a bit more ideal for, I think, what it is that you're looking for. But again, this one is under the Parks Commissioners, not under the care and custody of the Select Board. So if I had to suggest which one would be good for activities, I do think that the Parks property is probably the most ideal. And then, so the challenges, just to kind of step back, the challenges for each of them, the Woodruff property, the challenges on all of them is parking. That these are in residential neighborhoods, former farmland. There's really kind of one way in. It's a shared road with the family. Well, there's two main ways in, and they're shared roads with different families. You'd have to utilize a significant portion for parking. The properties can be relatively wet after it rains. It's pretty soggy ground. It's ideal for farming. It's not, in my opinion, it certainly can be utilized for community events, but there would be challenges. Now, one of the benefits is that this property is right near the center of town, which means that, if there were to be some kind of public event, you could potentially have people park at the school and then create some kind of shuttle service to bring them down there. And so that would make good use of all the parking available in the center of town, however many spaces there are between the high school and middle school and center here. But again, that would require a shuttle, or people would have to walk about half a mile to get to it. The challenge on the other property I mentioned on the second page, those two properties. So the first one on Pleasant Street, there's absolutely no parking there. The access between homes is only a couple of feet. And again, it's a really beautiful piece of property. But the challenge is, how do you get people into it and how do you get people out of it? Right now, the property that connects over to Pleasant Street, so to walk from Pleasant into the property, it is a relatively wet area. even in the summertime when I've walked it. There is another access on your map that says 23. It's identified as 23. That's actually a clearing. It's a clear area. So there is potential to come up with a negotiation with the farmer, I believe, who owns that. And again, there's no house there. It's wide open and easy to walk back into this property. But there would need to be some kind of arrangement, again, likely with what's identified as 23. And that would give much better, cleaner access into the property. And I've already mentioned the challenges with but again, no parking. And I've already mentioned the challenges with the last one, that really requires development in order to do anything with it. But again, 26 is beautiful, huge open field. All right, so going through the questions, and I don't want to, Josie, miss anything that you've asked me. So looking again through the properties, I would suggest these are the biggest ones that are under the care and custody of the Select Board, and the ones that can be accessed. So the Select Board has performed over the last couple of years site walks, so we can start the process of figuring out disposition, but there's no current plan. So right now, they're just under the care and custody of the Select Board. I see the note about, the next question is about 64 acres on Northwood Road. I just made the note that those are actually in the parks, and I do believe that that is an ideal property for what you're looking for. And there could again be, I believe in public-private partnerships. There is parking at the golf course. There could potentially be some kind of arrangement made with them to provide parking, again, shuttle service in case you wanted to utilize the parking at the center of town. The next question is, how would the development of town-owned properties be funded? I think the answer is through the taxpayers. But currently there is no plan for any of these properties. So, all right. I know that there's a couple questions about what are the biggest hurdles in our way at this time for not having an appropriate gathering space. If I offer my opinion is money, and it's what can we do for money? If I can just step to the side for a second and talk about municipal building design, because I know that those questions are coming up, and this is something that we've talked about in that capacity. So 30 School Street, which is located right in the center of town, is the former primary school. So one of the benefits here in the center of town, or at least based on the zoning rules, is that parking can be up to a half a mile away from whenever the parcel is. So if, for example, we were to do something over at 30 School Street and there's parking requirements, we can satisfy those parking requirements at other properties that are nearby. So part of what the Select Board was gearing up to do was looking at 30 School Street being kind of a community gathering space. So the vision there was not to immediately transferred over to the parks because, again, once something's under the care and custody of the parks commissioners, it's very hard to pull it out. It's very hard to change the purpose. Whereas if you build a park and it has a lifespan of 150 years, you may decide in 150 years from now to do something different with it. And that is a benefit to keeping property under the care and custody of the Select Board. So in that process for 30 School Street, the vision was to use the back end of the property as like a community kind of amphitheater. There's a natural formation there that it naturally dips, and we were looking to maximize the natural grade changes there to have a location permanently for band concerts, etc., using it for pollinator habitat, to create a passive kind of recreation or walking area for people, and then also to create somewhat of a pavilion. That way, if we had town events, we had a large pavilion. If different members of the community who don't have as big of yards wanted to have like a family event, that place could be available. So the Select Board, we started the process of developing these plans. We developed the plans. Part of it was to tear down the old school. We went through that process. And then the next process was to get construction documents and funding for construction documents, and that failed at town meeting. I think as I recall, the feedback that we received, it wasn't a close vote, and I think the feedback that we received was that there was some confusion over why is the Select Board creating a park. I think there was some confusion over whether or not that property should be used for a future town hall, and that we were kind of boxing ourselves in a bit by designating it as a park. But that is property, so the Select Board did a series of surveys to identify what to do with it, and the overwhelming response from the community was to use it for green space. And so that kind of was the target of what we're going at. So the barrier right now, it is one of the select board goals for the year. I know that we haven't made much progress on this goal, but currently it sits with us, and I think that that would serve as a great location, given the current population of our town, for gathering space. Building it out, it's roughly going to be, I think we had estimated it as roughly a 6 to 8 month construction project. Most of it is just regrading and planting and growing grass. There weren't many structures there, and the cost that we had for what we were looking at was roughly, if I remember correctly, about $5 million. Which also, I think when you're talking about a parcel that's about 2 acres and spending $5 million on it, I think the public at large isn't always aware of what current construction costs are, especially with prevailing wage, and that's pretty normal. But I think that there's a memory of us building, a library for like $1 million or so, and it's like, why does a park cost $5 million? Any questions so far? Okay, I want to make sure I'm not talking too much here. What are the best case scenarios? What has to line up in the town in Lunenburg in order to achieve a gathering space? I can't speak on behalf of the board because I don't think we've asked this question of each other, but I think all projects I recognize take many years, that you have to educate the public on them. You have to, any project has to have appeal to multiple demographics. So it has to, in my view, to get community support, knowing that a significant portion of our town are seniors, that any project that we do, there needs to be a benefit to seniors. If you're thinking about the parent population, roughly 20% or so of the community, I could be off on that number, but you need to also hit that demographic as well. And then, of course, the 18 through 55 that don't have children in the school system, and there has to be some kind of benefit to them as well. So creating a project that has multi-generational appeal is always a challenge, but that to me is a requirement. And that was why I think the plan that we had put forward hit all those marks, and it definitely hit all the demographics in town. And then as a resident of Lunenburg, do you have any comments for us as we consider the voices of Lunenburg asking for a gathering space? I want to go to your other questions, but generally, Facebook is not always a good guide of what's going to happen. I think that, I'm personally not on Facebook. I've signed on a couple times to watch PAC meetings before they were posted on YouTube, but I don't participate in social media. When I did, I recognized that the outrage sometimes you read online does not always translate to votes. And so, everything in town is up to votes. So, you can get a somewhat of a feel using social media, but I think that coming to meetings, multiple meetings, and speaking to committee members, that's, taking that approach to selling an idea, that people talk to their friends, you kind of can help get more people in the loop of what you're thinking about, so that way when things are presented, it's not brand new. Also, the surveys that come out on Facebook, well, again, helpful, you're not always hitting everyone. Not everyone uses Facebook. So I'm completely unaware of all the things that get advertised on Facebook unless they show up in the Lunenburg Ledger. I don't know about them. And I think a lot of people are in the same boat. So I have another page of questions, but are there any questions or comments to anything?
I have one question. Would there be a reason not to consider 27 Youngs Road as a gathering spot, which is the landfill?
So something that I've personally been working on is to get solar panels on the old dump, which is the 27 Youngs Road property. It's roughly a 40-acre parcel. We currently use, I believe, about 10 or so, a little less than 10 acres, really about 5. But we currently use 5 to 10 acres for like the leaves in the fall, and it's really the front portion of the property that we're utilizing. But a project I've been working on, and hopefully I'll have it before the select board in April, is is the starting process of getting solar panels there. One of the things that I'm challenged by is finding new sources of revenue for the town, and that are long-lasting, and that have an environment, that are environmentally sound. And if we can get to a position where we can get solar panels in the Old Town dump and are able to utilize at least 20 acres, we're talking multiple megawatts of power that can be generated. One approach is to help reduce the cost of electricity in town. Another is to commit those funds for a purpose. So what I would like to see, and again, the select board hasn't co-signed this, but I'm just giving my personal opinion, what I would like to see is us commit about 30% of that revenue to the general operating fund and about 70% to buildings. That if we had a source of revenue, buildings are our most expensive thing. Schools cost a lot of money. Town buildings cost a lot of money. If we had a steady source of revenue to offset that cost, then that really opens the doors to what we can do. And so that is something that, again, it's a longer range thing, but that's why that property is kind of not really on the table just yet. And the next question, so has the work of the Municipal Building Design Committee advanced any further with the hybrid concept that was put forth back in the summer of '23? So I want to take a minute to kind of go over what that plan is and then to explain kind of where we're at with it, because I think that is relevant. So the municipal building, the town has struggled for many, many years over what to do with its buildings. And the number one barrier is money, right? Because in order to do any of this stuff, we're going to have to do a debt exclusion, which means everyone's going to have to vote on it, and people are going to have to pay for it. And when you talk about adding $250, $300, $350 to everyone's tax bill for the next 20 years or more, a lot of people get concerned. And so what we started off with, and there's been different iterations of this committee. There was one in the 80s. I'm not sure what their final product was, but in the most recent go-around, we had what was called the Building Reuse Committee. That existed for 4 years, and roughly, I think, the mid-2000s. I'm not sure the exact years, but that was 4 years, and they were really looking at how to reuse some of this property, the surplus property. At that time, T.C. Passios, old primary school. The direction that board was kind of going in was a kind of a commercial partnership direction, I would say, in which you're trying to increase tax revenue coming to the town, looking for businesses that could potentially be located here, and that was kind of the general direction that they were going in. Some of the struggles, because I think that sometimes as voters we think, hey, what about using housing here? And I think that was something that we had talked about. What if we use that property for senior housing? And as part of that process, they did go out to see if there was any interest in housing. There simply wasn't any. What I do for a living, I manage a lot of property. We redevelop property. Something that I say that I know to be true is developers have to put up a lot of money on the front end of something. And so whenever you're in an environment where a developer needs to cough up a couple $100,000 and it's not even a guarantee that they're going to get the property, you've already basically told them that they're not going to do that, right? So most developers are going to go somewhere else where there's a better chance of them taking possession of that property. And what I mean by that is here in Lunenburg, before we want to sell town property or lease it out, we want to know what they want to do with it. Well, in order to have an idea what they want to do with it, they have to engineer it, and that's a lot of money. And that becomes a barrier to anyone private actually trying to plan to do anything on town property. In that process then, we came before the town. I wasn't on the select board, but the select board at that time came before the town to ask the town to allow the select board to negotiate the sale or leasing of those properties. I think we did that 3 years in a row, and every time it was turned down. The public wants to have say over what happens on town property. They don't want to give that power to any entity other than town meeting. And so realistically, that becomes a barrier for development. And that limits what we can do. So the municipal buildings, that reuse committee came for a couple years with articles. I believe most of them were voted down. And I think the only one that survived was the potential sale of the Brooks House. In which we were looking to sell that property for $1, in which someone would take the house, put it somewhere else, and of course, no takers. So we then created the Municipal Building Design Committee, And what we were looking at really was we created the TC Passios Reuse Committee, or whatever we called it at the time, Design Committee. And what we really focused on was TC Passios as a building. And what we were that building has a lot of benefits. It's where we vote. It has the gym that's utilized by the Adult Activity Center. It's utilized by a bunch of different entities. Has the boys, the after-school programs located there. PAC Studios are located there. The food pantry is located there. The superintendent's office is located there. So part of that plan was to look at turning TC Passios into kind of a community building, and then also consolidating all town offices into that building. Going through that process, we hit the pandemic, prices spiked, and then also the building codes are different than when that building was built. And what we identified was that to rehabilitate that building would roughly cost $28 to $30 million. That $14 million of it was just code upgrades. So we would spend $14 million for a building that looked exactly the same. And then even after spending $28 to $30 million, when you drove by it, it would pretty much look exactly the same. It would just be different on the inside. So from that, we then kind of pivoted, and then also that didn't address what was going to happen with Town Hall or Ritter. So the select board then changed the charge to for the committee to look at Town Hall and Ritter. And then we went through several iterations of what we could do, several different plans. And we ultimately agreed to what we call a hybrid plan. And that's a hybrid because our mission was 3 plans. And we came up with 3 plans. We didn't really like all 3 of them, or any one of them more than the other. And so we kind of did what we called a 4th plan, which was a mixture of all 3. And the general gist of what that is that would be utilizing the town hall to be a meeting house. So this would be the location for all town meetings. So what's behind us is the town manager's office, the assistant town manager HR office, and basically we would remove those 2 offices to make the room bigger, get it back to its original size. Downstairs, what's now currently offices, would basically turn into 3 smaller meeting rooms. So where the town clerk's office and the copy room are would be one, where the assessor's 2 rooms are would be another, and then where the back room is, where the finance department is, that would be the 3rd. So this would be 4 meeting rooms, with knowing that PAC Studio was here. Something we were also thinking about was the wires are very expensive. And so because the distances are so short, that it could be a pretty economical plan, and this would become the meeting house. Meeting houses are the original town halls in New England. We would then take the Ritter building, and rehabilitate the Ritter building to be the superintendent and the school district office. That would work pretty well based on the different needs that they have. Also, one of the considerations was the ACE program, which are the 18 through roughly 22-year-olds who need services after high school, and that they have to be co-located with some of the staff that are part of the school district office. And so the challenge in that building is that the walls don't go all the way up to the ceiling, because we still have the old HVAC design there. And one of the needs that the school committee or the school department has is privacy. And so part of that redesign, that because that used to be a library, the pounds per square foot or how it was designed. Libraries are meant to hold a lot of weight, so you build them different. So in a building, typically there's different pounds per square foot that you're designing off of. Common areas get more. Most homes have about 40 pounds a square foot. Libraries get about 300 pounds a square foot because they're designed. So that building is really sturdy, has really good bones. And so the plan was to bring the walls to the ceiling. That then changes the HVAC system. So a couple $1 million, but not too significant of a remodel, and then doing an annex onto that building for town offices. And so that would consolidate then all the staff that are currently in this building, that consolidates the staff that are currently in that building, and then building an office building. An office building is usually a little less expensive. You don't need as much square footage for them, but generally the price per square foot right now for a new build is about $350 per square foot with prevailing wage. And so we figure that we can build an office building for a little less than $5 million. So the current vision then would be, again, meeting house, school district office, town hall, or the new town hall as we would call it. And then the question that remained was, what do you do with TC Passios? And I think that was where we kind of got a little stuck. and we really turned to the school committee to say we really like Turkey Hill. That Turkey Hill's a younger building, it would better serve the needs of the community, and it's not gonna, and it's almost move-in ready, you know, in terms of what we would need to use that building for. So if we had Turkey Hill to use instead of TC Passios, we really wouldn't have to do many renovations to the building if that building gets certain renovations done now. It's going to need a new roof. It's going to need some critical building systems. We know that. It's going to need some security upgrades, but that cost would still be significantly lower than TC Passios. So the hold on this was last year. We were gearing up to go before the town for a debt exclusion, and then the tax situation happened, and I think we made a informed decision that it probably was not the time to ask the voters to spend more money, given the outrage of what was going on last year. And then we kind of targeted this year to be the year to go before the town, and then with the needs of the school department, the fact that there's now an override question on the ballot, that I think, you know, there's also kind of been the town manager recommended for us not to proceed with with a debt exclusion this year, and pretty sound. So the goal is next year to go before the town next year and ask for the monies to get moving on this. We also have committed ARPA funds to design this out, so that way we have visual renderings of what this all will look like, and that way we can get a cost estimation of what this all would cost. That's a lot of words.
You're doing great and very educational. Thank you.
So the next question, is the committee still considering the list of buildings for facility master plan to include TC? I think I've kind of answered that next question. I think at this point, you know, what we minimally want to do at TC Passios is preserve the first portion of that building, and where we have the critical stuff at. That may be a good plan, and to demolish the central and rear wings of that building to create parking space. We know that there's a need for more parking, especially if you see the sporting events or another field. So we don't have a vision yet. It really ties into what the school committee identifies as needs at Turkey Hill, and if we can, you know, move into that building, and if they're going to accelerate their building plans for a new school. Okay. Is the Ritter Building still being considered a primary site for the new town hall? I think I answered that somewhat, not really. It would be an annex. Is the plan for TC Passios to be more community-oriented building? You know, there's a need for community building here in town, but I don't think that, I think we have to be strategic about how we're going to proceed. I know that we've had meetings with, recently with the schools, with Park Chair, is Anna the chair? I thought she was.
And we just randomly send people now. Yes, she's the chair.
I was pretty confident in that. But so we recently had a meeting with Ms. Archambault as chair of the school committee, with Carol. I was there. I believe Evan was there. A couple of different people were there, but just to talk about what are these expensive things that are on the horizon, and how do we get them into a plan to fund. So we are having these conversations, and we again know that borrowing is going to be needed. Residents we engage with during the master plan thus far, I've talked about 30 School Street having a value as a green space, public space for events and gathering. Is that part of the hybrid plan still? It's separate from the hybrid plan, but yes, the hybrid plan does call for more parking. So it does call for an expansion of the parking area over there, because if you build an annex for a town hall, I think right now, there's only a handful of parking spaces, and we have an easement to the Historical Society to utilize a notable portion of that parking lot. So we would need to expand into closer to what was the footprint of the former primary school to create more parking spaces over there. And then when do you anticipate the committee might make a decision or recommendation? How do you see that moving forward? I'm not clear on what that question is actually asking.
Can I get a weigh-in from Over Under or RKG who asked that question?
Who is RKG?
You're working with Over Under.
Oh.
One of the consultant companies, yeah.
Yeah, I submitted these questions, but I think you generally answered it by saying that the town's looking to go forward. It sounds like in 2025 to town meeting.
Okay. Are there any remaining questions for me? 'Cause I'm not going to be here for the duration. But
Mr. Jeffries, you remember you tasked the 300th committee
yes,
with number 7, which was public gatherings. We can't postpone the anniversary.
correct.
So what we're going to have to come up with is some spaces for large gatherings within 3.5 years.
Yep.
What would you suggest as a direction for that?
That's a good question, Mr. Lincoln. I think that, shooting from the hip here a little bit, I think that we all should get behind the plan for Marshall Park. Let me start there. A revitalized Marshall Park, I think, provides a lot of opportunity for the community long-term. And I think it's also a pretty big park, right? And so having different events, if Marshall Park was a viable option for us, I think that would meet certain needs as you think about planning different events and what size of crowd you're expecting to be there. That Marshall Park, again, revitalized, and as they're moving forward with all the different funding that they've been able to secure, that if we can get behind supporting the Marshall Park project, I do believe that that's going to be helpful. The second would be the property on Northwood Road. There's a real need in our community to have passive recreation space, and the area that we had zoned is now a 34-acre solar farm, which was private property, but I mean right across the street near the golf course. That was a passive recreation area, and again, it's now an enormous solar park. So there's a need for space that's not necessarily committed to being an athletic field, where there's, scheduled every day, every week kind of activities, but that can function in a way, again, you have a lot of people that live in condos in town that don't have big backyards. We have a need for community gardens, for sure. And so if we can envision that parcel kind of being, the Northwood Road parcel, being a more open property with adequate parking, people can park in grass. But to me, I think minimal investment. Now, one of the strategies with that is and I've talked with Mr. Proctor, I've talked with the Powells, that, one of the things that we can offer, and the question is, how do we do this? And I know that I've mentioned this to Anna before, and the laws changed recently that have made this more challenging, but what we used to be able to do more easily is basically say, hey, if you build us fields here, we will give you rights there. And I know that there's interest from some of the larger land movers in town that if we were able to provide them with rights to mine sand and gravel from property that the town owns, and we assign a value to that we can then kind of negotiate equal value somewhere else of work to be done. Now, with prevailing wage and public procurement, it is tricky on how to do it, but that could be a viable option that's cost effective. And again, I know from my own interactions with the larger earth movers that they are interested, but we have to piece it together. So I would recommend, moving in the direction of Northfield Road. To me, that would be the most ideal. I think the other properties under the select board, I like the one in Wellham for a future school. The one that I said was a little wet, that's 61 acres. It's right in the middle of a residential neighborhood, and a lot of schools are in the middle of residential neighborhoods. That's a really good parcel for that. And then there's too many challenges with that big field, with us not having a lot of access into it at this time, that 40-acre parcel that I would, it's pretty. I do think that we can have events there. But again, we would have to bus people in, and we'd have to talk to the neighbors. But I do believe that 40-acre parcel, like I said, it's 40 acres of clear land, and it's pretty.
So you recommend the 300th committee approach the Powells?
No, what I would recommend is for the 300th committee to discuss with the Parks Commission what their plans are for Northwood Road, what can realistically get done over the next 3 years. And I would also encourage the utilization of that Pleasant Street property. I do think that that's a good parcel to do stuff at. The challenge there is that we're going to have to talk to neighbors because this is going to be in their backyard, and we will need to have some kind of shuttle service to get people. There's no way to pull up and park currently. But my opinion, those are the best parcels.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the members on Zoom?
None from me. No, I'm good.
I have a quick question. Previously, you mentioned that for the School Street property, the school was demolished, and then we didn't get approval for the funding to build the thing that we wanted. Is there any way, like, when we create a plan, to make kind of that whole plan be approved, so that it's just like we don't have to do this one thing and then get the next thing approved, and then probably my naivety, but that just seems like it might make
A little PTSD going on.
I know, I think both of us are like, part of it is, when you have these conversations in town, you always have people who say, give me the whole plan. And then you give them the cost of the whole plan, like, oh, no, we need to take this one bite at a time. I remember in the late 90s when we were talking about, coming up with a new plan for the public safety building, a new plan for the library, and at that time, we kind of balked at the cost, and we ended up doing piecemealing it for like 3 or 4 times as much money. So voters, in my opinion, vote with their wallet most of the time, and so it's challenging. Part of it as well, as far as process goes, was that property was under the care and custody of the school committee. And so it got transferred from the care and custody of the school committee to the care and custody of the select board. And I think that is just one of those things that we have to be more purposeful about, is that when we abandon a school building, having a disposition plan for the building before we walk away from it. And I think we saw that with TC Passios as well. And so, we had 2 schools that we walked out of, and then by the time the town gets together to say, what can we do with this, like TC Passios, now 25% of the building is unusable because of asbestos contamination, or what happened at 30 School Street, too much time went by, and what was a viable building that could have been rehabilitated had suffered too much water damage over the 15 years and became unusable. So I think our town the voters take a bit of time to make their mind up, and I think you have to approach them with good ideas a few times, but unfortunately, I don't think that, I think that as we move forward with the school buildings, we may be able to have a better plan going forward.
Yeah, it just sounds like there's a lot of examples of where it's cost more in the long term by doing it in the method of which we've chosen, that it might be, there might be a lot of, I don't know, that's something to support doing it in the way that we haven't tried. That might be better, but that's just my opinion. So good to know the background.
I think the voters, when interest rates were like, 2-3%, my preference at that time was, let's just borrow the money. Even though we don't necessarily know where all of it goes, it's never going to be cheaper than right now. But the voters can hear stuff like that, and they're like, yeah, I'm not giving, the town a blank check. You have a plan. But it would have been great if we would have borrowed this money when interest rates were 3% versus, what we're going to have to pay now. But it's hard to get, it's hard in a community where most people understandably just kind of trust that people are doing their job and don't always pay a lot of attention. It's hard to do what we would do in the private sector and the government sector. All right, I feel like I'm taking up a lot of you guys' time this evening.
This is extremely valuable. Does anybody else have a question? Thank you for giving us so much of your time.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. I, for one, am going to go home and probably rewatch this at half speed.
Have AI listen and take down all the notes.
Well, I want to thank you guys for the work that you guys are doing as well. I know that it's not easy to be here on a Friday night. I think when I got the date, I was like, there must be a mistake.
I said the same thing.
There's no competition. I shouldn't say this. There's a lot of competition on Fridays for this room.
I want to thank you guys for your work as well. I know that many of you are sitting on multiple other boards, or you're liaising with other boards, and and all of this. We see the same faces a lot in town, because once you have that desire to give back, Like it's there. So I just want to thank you guys for the work, and gals, for the work you guys that's being done to benefit our town, and anything that we can do on the select board. If if you're ever inclined and you want to send us some questions, through our office, then we'll definitely take them up. And then also on our agenda, we always reserve time for communications from other boards, and that really is an opportunity that at any time, representative from the committee is always welcome to come before the select board, and you have 10 minutes to kind of talk about whatever you want to. That's not necessarily on the agenda, so long as you don't need a vote from the board.
Thank you for letting us
Thank you,
know.
Mike.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Same to you.
I just want to hear his report. I just want to hear his report.
All right, we're going to move on to an update from Over Under. Rami,
Good evening, everyone. We have, almost out of time, but we have a couple of things we'd like to share with you. I'd like to sort of go over a little bit where we're thinking in terms of coalescing some of the work that's been done thus far to understand sort of values and goals, and then turn it over to Eric from RKG, who will sort of ask more specific questions about some of the areas that they've been involved in, specifically housing, transportation, economic development, and the like. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. Can everyone see my screen?
we can see it.
I'm going to try this. Are you seeing something that says agenda?
Yes.
Yes, agenda.
So we want to talk about values and goals. We've spent a fair amount of time talking to the community over the last year, and we believe that sort of this is the kind of underlay of anything that moves forward. We've sort of taken our first stab. This is merely a first stab. We want it will get worked out over the next few months, I'm sure, as to what those values are. And what we've heard might suggest something like the following. The future of Lunenburg should be neighborly, agricultural, green, communal, educational, safe, and sustainable. With respect to neighborly, this is a place that is welcoming of people of all ages and all income levels. In terms of agriculture, support farming and farmland. Green is specifically with respect to open space and recreation. Communal is providing a sense of, but also a place for community, so the gathering spaces we've been talking about, for example. Educational support, continued support of high-quality education, safe, both with respect to health and safety, and then sustainable is something that incorporates environmental sustainability and future resilience. I'm going to sort of move through these. The idea is these are sort of underlaying values that start to shape the following goals. And again, this is our first pass at presenting this to you. It's not that each of those values would be evident in every single goal, but each one sort of ties to those goals in one way or another. So for example, this first goal that would support a range of housing options for all ages and income levels ties to this idea of being, valuing neighborliness. The point of this goal is from that we can then start, once we've sort of agreed on values and goals, we can start to extract particular strategies or recommendations. So what follows is below is a series of possible, what would this mean, if we bought into this particular goal.
Rami, sorry, we're still saying the agenda.
Because I haven't,
Yeah.
thank you. So, support, so the idea here is, the goal, the value The values help establish a series of goals. The goals then start to give us a way to measure or to evaluate whether specific strategies make sense for your community. Some of the sample strategies that support this goal would be, changing existing zoning to encourage smaller houses or smaller parcels, adopt a more flexible zoning, prohibit short-term rentals, or provide tax incentives for senior citizens who own their homes. And we're not proposing any of these, we're giving you these as examples of possible recommendations that would be sort of logical outcomes of this set of goals. A second goal is to protect farmland and support farms. Some recommendations that might emerge from this is to reduce property tax rates for farms, for example, or to create a conservation fund that allows for the preservation of farms. The third one is to encourage commercial development within existing commercial areas. Some of the recommendations that might occur would be, for example, to hire an economic development director, encourage small businesses in the town center, reduce red tape for small businesses, change zoning to encourage commercial development in certain areas, make the town center more walkable. That would sort of support more foot traffic for those commercial developments. And then assess options for additional parking in the town center, all of which are possibly related to this. The next one is to build upon efforts to improve natural open spaces and recreational opportunities. And then a series of examples here from a mountain bike trail, provide bike parking in town center, expand the trail network to connect the trail network, encourage new developments that provide access to adjacent conservation lands, improve access to the town beach, develop public access to Lake Shirley. Again, these are all just examples. I keep saying that because I want you to concentrate more on the goal than the specific strategies. So our plan is to come up with a very long list of possible strategies that we then evaluate together. The next one is to support community gathering spaces and civic participation. So this is both, creating or improving of public places, plazas, parks and whatnot, as well as the communal activity that is sort of behind that. So incentivizing volunteerism, encourage civic engagement on that side, and then on the spatial side, develop a town green, for example, between the senior center and TC Passios, or assess options for developing a community garden, and some of the others there. In the interest of time, I'll move to the next slide. The next one would be to optimize use of municipal buildings and properties. So we had a very insightful talk just now, and I think Eric and I have our work cut out for us to evaluate all of that, but it's a lot to sort of weigh in, but I think so some of the specifics here might not be relevant, but some of them actually are. But the idea is that the goal would be to sort of, create the plan for the use of municipal buildings and properties. Similarly, related is to improve school facilities. In some way, these two things are interlocked, as we just heard. And then finally, foster a safe and resilient town infrastructure. Look at things like enacting strong stormwater management. These are all sort of ideas that have come up in different places. Prohibit fireworks, provide a town waste center, provide alternative electric supplier, and better enforcement of speed limits. So I hope that made sense. The idea here again is you know, I think over the next few months, we want to roll this out as a draft and get feedback. We want to get feedback from you first, and we're now working on ways to incorporate this into a survey in ways that we would get some useful feedback back from the larger community. But if I can ask you to hold your thoughts on this until Eric presents, does that make sense? Is that just in the interest of time?
Sure. I don't think the rest of us here are in any rush. Rami, do you have a time constraint?
No, I thought I heard you say that some people had to leave early, so.
So they've already left. We still meet, we still meet quorum.
Oh, okay. In
But
that
we're
case,
fine.
I'm happy to take questions, or it's your call.
So I missed the beginning. I'm very sorry. Could you repeat kind of the background of the very beginning of this?
Sure. What we're hoping to do with this is to sort of create a document that will, or a set of, I hesitate to say rules, but sort of principles upon which we can evaluate whether any recommendations that get made make sense for the town of Lunenburg. And the way we like to do that is to sort of start with underlying values, or sort of tease out some of these underlying values, and then establish a set of goals that are sort of based upon some of these values. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. So for the values part, it seems like that's what we've been kind of collecting the data on from the surveys. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So is it, sorry, go ahead.
No.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're pretty comfortable that these are values that represent you at this moment.
Yeah. Okay, that's what
where
I was
we-
going to ask. I'm like, I think we've established those pretty well.
Yeah. And then I think where we're looking for feedback and sort of testing the water, so to speak, is this series of goals.
Okay, makes total sense. Okay. So are these example strategies the kind of options that are going to be provided in the next survey, or is it still like being figured out?
That's the piece, you know, that we want to sort of roll the survey out in time for the town, to publicize it at the town meeting. And we'd like to get feedback in time for the next public meeting, which is scheduled for the 30th of May. We've sort of had back and forth amongst ourselves as to what makes most sense in terms of how, given where we are into town meeting and then elections, how useful is it for the strategies to be a part of that discussion, or to keep it at the level of goals and values, if that makes any sense. My concern, to be perfectly honest, is someone could see an example strategy and understand that we're proposing that specific thing, for example, and we may lose people's support for the larger goal at this moment, or at the moment that's sort of coming up.
That would also, yeah, that would also be my concern as I'm looking at these.
So my recommendation would be to keep it at the level of the goal itself. And to solicit support, yay or nay, and also to ask people to make suggestions as to how they could envision, recommendations for how they could envision examples of these things. Am I being clear?
Yes. I believe so. That would be the way that I would lean, would be to have people fill it in, because I think that they would already kind of echo what's listed here, although Rami said that this isn't exactly what they're going for, but I think that what I've read on this list are things that I've read on those surveys, and that they would echo, but I think it would empower people and open the door to get a new perspective if they're out there, but just to have it available for people to fill it in. And I'm open to thoughts on that.
It seems like the survey is going to be similar to the previous surveys if we're looking for new feedback. From my perspective, I think the survey should be considerably different than the other surveys because we've already collected the information, and I think if we keep repeating the same surveys, people are going to lose interest. They're like, I already did this.
So the previous surveys, from what I see, and this is just my perspective, is that they've enabled people to get to the value portion or the goal portion. We've collected the information that supports a range of housing options for all ages and income levels. And now I think that the goal is to collect strategies from people. It's not so, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So, and that's something we haven't asked before, but I think, Rami, isn't that the goal of this survey, is to collect how information and perspectives from residents on how they would suggest we achieve it, right?
Yes, that's exactly it.
And so Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've approached it from that angle yet.
No, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, so just kind of like straighten it all out in my head. But yeah, so I agree. I think that would be a good direction to go for that. And I think we need to make it clear of like, these are the goal, like from everything we've done so far, like these are the things that we have come up with, and like make it really clear, like this is the outcome of your feedback, you know, and these are the 6 areas that we're now assessing. Yeah.
Can I add that we also want to make sure that these are the goals and that the level of support is there, and make sure we're not missing anything. Yeah, so I think that's also part of the intent of this survey, to my mind.
So you're saying, Fotini, that, you know, we want to sort of double check that these are in fact, this is what we've heard. Are you in agreement with these as the goals?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you all, as the steering committee, do you, if you feel that these goals are representative of the process we've conducted thus far, then perhaps we don't need to do that. But you know, if you think there are questions about, I mean, there are some for us when we were working on these that seem super clear. Others haven't really been tested in the same way yet. For example, neighborly. Go ahead.
Well, I think you're right, Rami. I think asking, do you agree with yada yada, plays back to what Kim suggests we avoid doing, because that, to me, indicates the previous surveys, kind of an echo on that. When we're trying to ask a different question, how would you achieve it? And I think that's where we need to just be clear, is we're asking you how you would achieve it. And we're not really, the point of the surveys in the past has been to get to that point, as collectively we want to support a range of housing options for all income levels and ages. Like, that's what the other surveys have indicated. So now, how do we do that?
Yeah, I think it needs to be clear of like, this is our ask. This is the only thing we're asking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, not so much do you agree with this statement, but because the other surveys have indicated that people do collectively agree with it, how would you achieve it is where we need to be clear.
Is there an option to comment upon the goals, like to wordsmith or to add? My question is, it says improve school facilities. Well, I would say improve school facilities and opportunities. So I don't see school and education as just being the building. I see it being the opportunities that exist therein. So I don't know where that kind of feedback would fall in.
Probably just in a supporting comments section underneath each question, perhaps? Would that make sense? I mean,
But you bring up a good point, and I think something we need to do a better job of making clear is that each of these are both policy and physical, right? That there are physical things as well as issues of process that come into this, I would say in all of them. And sometimes we've made it clear and other times we haven't. So you're right. So I think with respect to school facilities, in fact, we had a discussion of this the other day, is it school facilities and programming? And I guess I was wrong to say take out programs.
Yeah, and that being said, I do think that we should heavily scrutinize the goals, the wording of the goals before we put out the survey, because we want to make it effective. We don't want it to be ambiguous in any way and maybe mislead people in what we think, because that kind of negates the purpose. We won't really get like good data.
So why don't we take another pass at this with this feedback and then give it to the committee and ask you to provide written feedback, if you don't mind, if that's reasonable?
Rami, I thought the goal for launching the survey was April 30th. Or why is that date in my mind? Or perhaps
I think we wanted it ready in time to publicize it at town meeting.
which is on the 4th.
The 4th.
Which is on the 4th, but.
So we wouldn't have another master plan committee.
That's what I'm suggesting in writing.
Do we have
Feedback.
to have the survey ready by the
We
town
don't.
meeting, or just at least like advertising it, be like, oh, it will be ready at this time, and this is how you will get that information?
I think just from a marketing standpoint, it should be ready.
Okay, that's fair.
I think if we had an opportunity for, to have a copy of the slides and comment on them, that will give them a better idea as to how to focus it.
Rami, could you, is there a way to format a mock survey specifically for this committee so that we would be able to add comments?
Yeah, we've.
Almost a
ready.
pre-launch?
Mhm. We have the beginnings of that, so we can share that.
That would,
Yeah.
we would just have to check our town emails and take the survey.
And provide feedback directly to them.
So it would literally, in my mind, it's a survey we would take as committee members and just autofill. And the data would just automatically go to Rami. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you could put your comments right in
Yeah. Yeah,
the-
so it's not like we skim through the survey and then we have to go and time up an email. It would just be us being surveyed on the survey.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
sure.
Could we do like a two-phase approach, like one kind of be like a Word document with just the text, and then the next one be the survey? So I feel like it might be like difficult to provide comments on like the wording of the goal in the survey.
So it will be formatted differently. We're not taking the survey.
We're taking a survey for us for assessing.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair.
So
That makes
basically,
sense. So we won't be able to play around with the questions. We won't be able to answer the questions. We are critiquing the
The
words.
survey.
Yep. And the only thing we would be able to fill is the words.
yeah, we'll leave a space for
Yeah.
you to, you can copy and paste the entire thing and reword it, or you can just say, I don't like that, or this works, or, there'll be a.
And then what would happen from that? So it would go to over under, and then what?
We would revise it.
Yep.
Or what if we have differing opinions?
So, that would be where time constraint is the time constraint, and I would say that the most collective views get published, because the goal is a hard May 4th. Rami and I and the planning board chair meet every other week to discuss some of the intricacies. But I would just suggest that this committee be as clear as possible in its critique of the survey to provide no room for error or misinterpretation.
The other option is to give you to provide instead of the survey, to provide like a Google Doc that we all have, so you can see everyone else's comments.
Evan has his hand.
Do that.
You can't.
That breaks open meeting law.
Open meeting law. You can't.
Unless only Josie can see the comments.
This is why Evan and I are jumping up and down.
We're all jumping.
They could go to the board.
Lou, do you want to take it?
I think you did it. You have to be really careful about this. You can't have a document circulating around. By the way, it's 7:20 on a Friday night. Yes, my feet are up on the desk.
We can't see them, unfortunately, though.
So you can't have a document that's circulating around that people are sort of commenting on live, and because that could count as it would count as a deliberation. An ongoing deliberation. So this doesn't necessarily have to involve a wonder, but they have to be like, maybe they blast the survey out. Each person on their own takes a look at it, puts together their own comments. Then a meeting is posted of the master plan committee, master plan steering committee, and then that's when the matchup happens, all in public view. That would be an acceptable route.
That is what we're suggesting with.
Okay, I think Evan and I weren't clear on that, and that's why we were like.
No, having a document where we can, as a group, see each other's answers and have a discussion breaks open meeting law.
Okay, yep.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Great.
just so I'm clear, Rami and his team are going to publish a survey where literally I would jump on my phone, take the survey, I'm the only one that sees it, it goes to be collected. The rest of the committee doesn't see my answer, but Rami and his team format the survey to distribute to the public based off of that information.
Would we meet again to, like Lou suggested, to discuss the questions before it's distributed, like based on the revisions, based on our input? I think that would be a good idea.
I'm fine with doing that. I need a quorum to agree to meet for an additional meeting.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with that, but it's not something that I can just, all right, we're meeting on this date. And I can't schedule that with everybody right now because a lot of it has to play into, I have to check room availability and coverage availability.
Hey Lou, do you guys have a meeting the last Tuesday of April, Select Board? That happens to be the 30th of April.
They're shaking
What is
their heads.
that? What's the date there?
The 30th of April? Because usually you guys don't meet the last Friday of the month. I wasn't sure if you were meeting the last Friday of the month.
But they're taking off the 16th.
I think there is. Yeah.
Okay.
Evan, you know?
I think you are, because you're taking the 16th off because it's school vacation week.
Right.
Okay.
So you'd only have
That's right, that's
three
right,
meetings
yes.
then.
Yeah, thank you for letting me know when my.
Not a problem.
I could always check and see if there's availability in the school.
Okay.
And we're not a large, we're actually,
I mean, it's not as good with the
No, that's,
Zoom and all that, but I can check and see what we can do.
and we could
That's
always
fine.
meet 100% via Zoom anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we all,
Which might be
that's true,
easier.
we could just meet via Zoom,
Yeah.
if that's,
so if we want to do that, I would ask that at the end of this meeting, everybody, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take Evan's past advice and create a doodle survey where I will add some dates and we'll get it scheduled that way. Thank you, Evan. All right, so I'm on board with it. It's just a matter of everybody's schedules lining up whether or not it can
Sure.
happen.
Yeah.
So. Go ahead, Rami.
No, I was going to suggest that if there's nothing else regarding that, that we hear from Eric. I know he's got
Sure.
a deadline.
Okay, great, thanks. Hi, everyone, nice to see you again. Sort of in line with the preparation or preparing to put together a draft set of strategies that would be folded under the different values and goal statements, I thought it might be useful and certainly useful for me and helpful for me as we're starting to think about housing, economic development, transportation, and public facilities to just ask a couple of questions to sort of see from the committee's point of view, are there any priorities in terms of these different topic areas? Where might we want to place some specific focus as we're thinking about strategies? Just recognizing that, Lunenburg at the end of the day is a small town with, limited capacity you can't do everything and you can't do everything at once. So I wanted to see if it was okay to just ask some questions around those different subject areas as we're starting to think about putting together the list of strategies. It would really be helpful to us.
Sure.
And I would say too, I'm happy, I had shared this with Rami in the draft form, and I'm happy to also just take individual comments on these if we don't get to everything or folks need some time to think about this more. So just going through and thinking about the public feedback that we've received so far, both in the meetings as well as through the survey documents and in the research that we've done as part of our existing conditions. Around the topic of housing, I was thinking about kind of 3 specific areas that we might want to dig in on, recognizing there's probably others, but these ones seem to rise to the top. One was just around Lunenburg's continuing aging population and maybe how the town should consider different housing options that might be more either accessible, affordable, recognizing that that's come up quite a few times, or also just amenable in terms of what older adults might be looking for. And more specific to the master plan, because it's not just about policy or programs, it's also about geography. So we also wanted to ask questions around, well, where might it actually be appropriate if we want to encourage different types of housing? Where might it be appropriate to do that in town? Or we don't want to encourage new types of housing. We want to think about policies and programs that help older adults just remain in their homes for longer periods of time. There's a lot of different strategies that we can consider around this. So I wanted to ask that question. The second question I wanted to ask was just around recognizing that Lunenburg's total number of employees that are working in the town, not town employees, but all employment in the town has risen. But there are also a lot of occupations and jobs that are here in Lunenburg, both on the private side and the public side, that pay wages of less than $50,000 a year, which as housing prices continue to climb, makes it really hard to actually live and work in the community. So would it be appropriate, to consider strategies that could help expand housing options for those folks? And then just the last question specific to the village center, because I know that's come up a lot through our process. Is it appropriate to consider housing as part of the strategy to, sort of help bring more activity to the downtown, more foot traffic, more spending power in that village center? So those were 3 of the topics I was thinking around housing that would be great to get some feedback on, and maybe we could spend a couple minutes just talk about this one, then I can move on to the next one.
I have quite a few thoughts on this, and I'm going to speak as Josie Gilchrist, resident of Lunenburg, and not chair of the master plan. So, my husband and I'm 28 years old, and my husband's 31, and my daughter is the 10th generation on Mulpus Road in Lunenburg. There's a street named after my husband's family. There's history all over incorporated with the Gilchrist. And we are the first generation that can't afford to live here. And with everything increasing in prices, young families are having fewer children. My husband and I being one of them, we have one daughter, and that's all we're ever going to have. And as I look around the housing options around Lunenburg, there is no way in heck that we are going to acquire one of those homes. For one, we don't need it. We are a very small family, totally happy in a 700 square foot apartment that my husband's parents graciously rent to us, and thankfully they have that available for us. If they didn't, I would be moving back to Oklahoma where I grew up, because there's no options for me here. And that's really sad, because there's, 10 generations, and we're the first that will probably have to be leaving. That is a lineage that is going to be cut off from this region forever, and that's really sad to think about. So yes, I think, being completely biased with my own experiences, there should be more options for me to have a home, and not the, almost $1 million homes full of just empty space that you're going to fill with useless things that my husband and I don't need, and many other families like us. A lot of our close friends have left Lunenburg to live elsewhere because they also don't need the space, or they can't afford those types of homes. What families like ours are looking for are very small homes with land that we can utilize, with chickens and goats and a garden to sustain our family. And we hear about Lunenburg becoming sustainable. That's what we want. We just can't have it. So yeah, I have a big problem with what's happening now in Lunenburg. So those are my thoughts. Moving on.
I also have thoughts.
Yeah.
Also, just as a member of the public, I agree with your sentiment wholeheartedly. I just recently moved to Lunenburg about 2 years ago, and I'm already worried about affording my house because of the increase in everything, but I don't plan, hopefully, on leaving. I'm going to try my hardest because everywhere's expensive, right? So, and it's really discouraging to see all these, giant new houses with empty space, really expensive amenities associated with them without really any usable space outside of them either. It's not, I think, what Lunenburg wants to be, but we're allowing it. Well, I don't know, loosely allowing it, like maybe passively, I don't know. But I think, I don't know what the answer is, but because I know, like, with developers, it's hard, like, they don't want to put in the money to, like, make these small houses because it's not, like, cost effective. But I don't know if there's a way that we could make it cost effective in terms of, like, making smaller houses, because, like, you're not putting in the most expensive things you can find in the world, like the materials. It's like just basic stuff, and I know that's already expensive, but I agree, we need to figure out if there's a way, maybe, I don't know, new houses that already exist, making them usable more long-term, like when people leave, but we don't want people to leave. We want people to stay and be able to afford to live here. So I agree.
Evan, you have your hand up.
So I guess I just want to echo both what Josie and Kim have offered, but I worry that the problem is a little bit more difficult, is a lot more difficult to address, which I think we all know. But just anecdotally, there's a property next door to me that is 32 acres, I believe, that was just purchased for 4 times the original price that it was purchased just before COVID, and it's undeveloped land. And they're developing 5 properties, potentially. They're splitting it into 5 parcels, and they're going to be putting in giant homes on there. And there's nothing that can be done about it. I attended the planning board's meeting where they basically just have to say, yes, you have 50 feet of road, frontage along a road and X number of parameters that meet the requirement, and that's it. You can do whatever you want now, and off they go. So I agree. I think we do need a lot more housing on both ends of a lot more affordable housing on both ends of the age group, basically. The younger adults kind of just getting in, and some of the older adults that are ready to downsize, that want to stay and don't want to be taxed out or priced out. But the way that developers are currently working and operating, I don't know if there's much that we can do. As soon as they scoop up, I mean, nobody was gonna buy this property for 200 and something thousand dollars. But a developer from Florida came right in, scooped it up, offered the money, and off it went. So I'm not sure if there's anything we can do, and actually I'd be curious to ask the consultants if they've had any experience with towns changing their sort of ability to keep out developers and sort of almost, I guess you could call them sort of, I don't know, lecherous developers in a way.
Yes, there are definitely things that we can suggest on the strategy, so it's really helpful to hear this feedback. It's just giving us some direction. So one of the few things that municipalities have control over is the regulatory environment in terms of zoning. I don't know if the property you're talking about was done through an approval not required, like an A&R plan. Those are challenging, very challenging. But there might be ways in which we could strategically suggest zoning changes to maybe just change the rules or allow more options for a property owner or a developer, whatever it might be, to come in and do something like a cluster subdivision where on 32 acres, instead of doing 5, you could do 15, but you make the home smaller, the lots maybe are in common ownership or are smaller, and you preserve some open space for the community. So you could potentially still make the same amount of money, or hopefully more, doing it that way, but you get more housing, hopefully at a slightly more reasonable price, and the town also gets to preserve some actual open space. So that's one, just one of many different options that we could consider in the strategies. But hearing this feedback is exactly what I was hoping.
It was an A&R, so thank you for reminding me. That's exactly what it was.
Sure. Yeah, I kind of figured the way you were describing it.
Lou, you have your hand up?
I do. So this is an issue we've talked about before, and it's a little bit circular, and there are a lot of levers to consider. I'm absolutely sympathetic to the situation that you described, and we do need to figure out how to address it. Also, for seniors too, for sure. But things spin in on themselves too. I mean, there needs to be a balance, right? There's also a benefit to having giant homes with massive tax bills that have 4 people living in them, because they're contributing massively to the tax base, which helps make it more affordable for other people, right? It's a whole circular thing. Like if you have 20 acres, and it's got 4 homes with 16 people, and 8 kids in the schools, from a tax-based perspective, that's arguably better than 10 homes with 24 kids in the schools. You get what I'm saying? You get what I'm getting at here? I'm not totally articulating it, but it's like you pull on one lever and it puts something else out of balance. But I'm totally sympathetic to the idea, and it absolutely has to be addressed. How to make more affordable housing really across the whole spectrum, from young people all the way through seniors, but certainly those 2 groups in particular. So,
great.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly why this master plan is so necessary, because we're hearing exactly what people want, and the answers of, all right, do we want extremely gigantuous houses with very few people that are participating in the community but are generating a lot of tax revenue? Or do we want several smaller homes that accommodate younger families that are going to grow up and pour into this community and start building communities of their own that's going to be very tight-knit and that's going to be sustainable, or the other criteria that we're seeing that's important to Lunenburg? So that's exactly why we're doing this, and why we need residents to use their voice and take surveys and participate.
I think in the long term, you know, if you're looking at short term, like, yes, the larger houses bring in the tax revenue, which makes it more affordable for other people to live here because they're, you know, providing more, but long term, I actually think it's detrimental, and it continues the cycle of raising property values, and then regular people can't live here, so it's only going to be people who can afford to live here, and it's going to drive out that community. So I think short term versus long term, just from my perspective, without all the information that everyone else might have, you know, I think it would be detrimental to kind of think that allowing the larger houses is beneficial for everybody in town long term. But yeah.
And I'll touch on number 3 a little bit. The commercial areas in the village center. I say that's a yes, that, you know, I think that housing is important in those areas for exactly the reasons that you have listed. You know, I think without knowing what incentives could be offered, and things like that, you know, I think it's a great conversation to have to see what the options would be for those incentives. But I mean, I look at, you know, some of our areas right now, and I think, well, wouldn't it be nice if we had I'm thinking of like the Wake Forest, North Carolina area, where we went down, my husband and I and 2 of our children, and we rented an Airbnb, and how cool it was to be actually on the 2nd story of a commercial building, and to be able to like walk downstairs and, you know, walk around the corner, and there's a coffee shop right there, and there's, you know, I think that's I think that's something, when you think of small town America, I think of things like that, things where you are immersed in the, you know, in the downtown feeling of that small downtown feeling of community.
Evan, you have your hand up?
It just to go back to what Lou said, and I know, Lou, having been on the Board of Assessors, please correct my math here if I'm wrong, but wouldn't the tax levy that's accumulated from say a $2 million home paying at $14.10 a thousand, making about just over $28,000, if you had 10 homes at $200,000, it would pull the same amount of money in, correct?
It would, but the difference would be that you would have less demand, arguably, on, you know, common resources like schools and things like this.
Okay.
So it's a very tricky issue, and it's exactly where it came at. Is that kind of thing? Is my time on the assessors? That kind of thinking. Not that we could really do anything about it. It's just the way we thought about things. That type of math. And this is why this is such a tough nut to crack, because nothing anybody has said in the last 10 minutes is off base. It all makes sense. How do you align all those planets? I mean, I listened to Josie's story. I'm like, that is just heartbreaking. Like, I would hate, like, a 10-generation family. You know, we can all almost name all of them in this town, and that's part of the fabric of and the history of the town. I would hate to see people, those descendants have to leave town.
And that's why I think of, I'm hearing you say the schools, and I agree completely, and that's, I mean, it's evident. But at the same time, it's like the people could be pouring into those schools socially, or the volunteer work that could be done in this town, or the community that could be built. Because, yeah, I mean, smaller homes, more children than one very large home and maybe 2 children. That could overwhelm the schools, but at the same time, you're raising a generation that could take care of the schools. You're raising a generation that could take over what we're doing here today. And that will actually want to, because they grew up in a community that keeps them here. People go to where there's community, whether they have to go somewhere new and build it themselves, like I've done here, or they grew up and they have family that just pulls them to one place or the next. So it's important, and it's an aspect that I don't think we talk about enough, is the community impact. When I look around and I see all those very spaced out, very large homes, I think how lonesome. You know, I don't know exactly why they moved here. But in talking to a lot of them, nobody's really involved, and that's their choice. But in building communities, people will get involved. People will find where they settle in the town and benefit the town over time, and that's worth far more, in my opinion.
This also allows for diversification of the town as well. I mean, it's not lost on me when you look at just about every single board in town, what the makeup is of those boards. And having, $2 million homes, given historical precedents, it's not attainable for a lot of people. So even just trying to attract, not just beyond keeping people in town, but actually inviting more people in and enjoying that increased diversity is, I think, also in there as well, and this just would help that too.
And I wonder if the amount of resources, because like we're talking about people having children, needing to go to the schools and everything, like we know people are having less children. It might not be as much of an impact, as we might anticipate from previous generations. My grandparents had 7 kids. Like between all of my cousins and I, there's 2. So like I think it's just a reality too. If people are having less kids, people can afford less kids. Everybody who moves here might not want them. They might want goats and chickens and everything instead, like me. So I think it's a valuable idea to just think about, to challenge, are all these people realistically, like based on population data and rates of birth rates, what is our population going to be and what would we really need to support? Because we might need to have more houses for more kids. Maybe if we had these 2-3 houses, they're not going to have any, and so we're not going to have anyone in the school system or to come and volunteer. Like we might be worried about the population lowering too much too.
That's a great point. And Carol, correct me if I'm wrong, but the schools have not really had an increase in class sizes for quite a while now. There's been small increases, but nothing substantial. But at the same time, the town is growing substantially.
Yeah, there has been no major growth in the school district in quite a bit. And also when new development is being discussed, and when for example, when the apartments went up on the west side of town, people kept saying, oh, there's going to be a lot of kids. There aren't.
I was going to bring that up. And
there aren't.
I can remember those conversations and, not the fear, but the concern, I guess, that we were going to be inundated because they were 1 and 2 bedroom units, and that we were going to end up with a large number of students moving into the district. And then when reality came, we didn't have that. That wasn't what happened, and it's even now that it's been there for a number of years, both Arrive Lunenburg and the Whalum Luxury Apartments, I don't think we've seen the number of children don't seem to be differing. It's not growing as the years are going on.
But we just lost $340,000 in 40S money because of loss of kids in that exact area.
Yes, most definitely. And I think too that, maybe some of the other, near my house, let's say, there's like, 7 new homes or whatever, really big homes. I don't see any kids. There's 1 little girl, I think. Where, some of the apartments, there probably are more kids. I think it's a balance. I think everything needs to be a balance. I think we need to have small homes so that people can afford to move into town. I live in a very small home. That is how I can manage to stay here on a fixed income. My home is very small. I think people should have those choices. And if they want to move into a huge house, we have lots of those too. I think everything is a balance. But there needs to be some homes available for people who wish to stay here, who can't afford those huge homes. I could not afford one of those homes. I would not have moved to Lunenburg 35 years ago when I did, if I had had to have bought a huge home like that.
Many of the young families that I know that have maybe 1 or 2 children say that 3 years ago or 4 years ago, they had purchased their home. If they had to buy it today, they couldn't afford to live here.
Right.
They missed it by that much.
The interest,
Oh, I
when the
know.
interest went up,
Yeah.
it made everything unaffordable.
But it's sad because that's my generation. Like, where do we
Sure.
go? But no, it's just, I have a very personal tie to it because a lot of the people that in my community, my small community, are in that position.
Sure.
They need options. But,
Great.
okay.
I have a couple other ones to get to. Are we okay moving on?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. That was perfect. I appreciate that. Okay. So just on economic development, a couple things that I was thinking about, I was hoping to ask tonight. So as I mentioned before, Lunenburg has seen some growth across a couple of different industry sectors in terms of jobs in the last 10 years. It's mostly happened around healthcare, construction, some in manufacturing, and then a bunch in like retail and food services. And one thing I wanted to ask was, are these the types of sectors that you think people would like to see continued growth in? And if not, then as we start to think about strategies for the master plan, are there ways in which we try to shift either policies or marketing or incentives or whatever it might be to try and push in a different direction? So that was one question. And then we've done this in other communities where we've done master plans and comprehensive plans. And I think it might be useful here if you think, but there's a couple of different commercial and industrial areas all across Lunenburg. You've Town Center, the Mass Ave, Electric Ave area, obviously Leominster, Shirley Road, a very different place than these others, and there are more. Would it be worthwhile just thinking through what those different areas could look like? Do they stay sort of the same as they are today? Should we think about like a different regulatory framework or an economic framework for those areas? The third question, I think I got answered during the first presentation, so maybe if we focused on 1 and 2, I wasn't sure if there'd be any opportunities for disposition of like the public lands and buildings, but it sounds like the plan is starting to come to light about what the use for those different properties might be. So maybe just on the first 2, I'd love some input.
So on number 1, I actually think that I don't know if we necessarily need to shift that growth. I think that it would be really nice to have a larger commercial tax base, regardless of what industry it's in. I think we need to find a way to encourage more business in Lunenburg, regardless of what it is, that's sustainable long-term. I feel like, even just using a restaurant, for example, we have one restaurant in town that's changed hands, I think, 3 or 4 times since we've lived here. And that's fine. I mean, if they do what they need to do to survive, but it would be nice to see, a restaurant that's in here long-term that, because that feeds the tax base too, as you bring, people come into town, they go to, I'll use Ixtapa for example, they go to Ixtapa, they might run across the street to Walmart, Hannaford, before going home. So by having even those smaller things like that, helps in the long term as well.
Evan?
To piggyback off of that, we have, in that exact same plaza where East Tapa is, there's now only, I believe, 2, I think only the ends of the building are currently occupied. There's multiple stores that are open and available. There's a restaurant in there, there was a Dollar Tree in there, I think there's something else in there as well. So there's retail and commercial space available, but it doesn't seem like anybody wants to move into it. And I'm not sure why that is. We have another one a little further down, closer to Fitchburg, where the pottery painting place is. It was open for forever, and they just put a little patchy in there just recently. So that there's already built infrastructure as well. So beyond just attracting, I think, new commercial and industrial, or commercial and retail. It's, how do we get them into a building that's already in existence? And say, why, would you like to come here? We have a building already set up for you. You just have to build it out.
Yep.
Going off of what Evan said, the location near the pottery painting place, from what I understand, it was held up not for a business not wanting to go in there, but because of parking, and the usage there, and a lot of hoops they had to jump through with the town. So I think that, and I'm not even sure how this would happen, but a comprehensive look of the avenue in which you open up a business in Lunenburg on the town side would be helpful for this particular set of questions. And that's why the position that I've always been in is ask the businesses, can we get businesses to come in here? Because they have a lot to say about it. But I wish there was a way to kind of critique the process in Lunenburg specifically with opening up a business.
Yeah, because if we have the locations for many businesses to move into, maybe not like a specialty thing, but there's a lot of other things that aren't that, into these locations that already exist, yeah, we have the space for it, you know, people need to buy stuff or have services, so we have like the need for it, you know, kind of, I'll expand on that in a second. But also, yeah, we should, if that's the reason why people, like, yeah, we need to determine what the reason is why people can't open businesses and stay, address that, like the actual kind of root cause of it, because it's hard to kind of compete with the surrounding towns. Leominster has a lot of good restaurants. Fitchburg has a lot of stuff. I've actually seen Fitchburg lose a lot of businesses as well. So, I mean, I don't know kind of maybe what their reasoning, you know, what their challenges are there. You know, but that being said, like, we have surrounding towns that have all these things that people go to, that they routinely go to. So I think it would be good for us to kind of diversify like what we're looking for. Like if we just do only these types of things that everyone else has, like, I don't know, it just doesn't make us unique in any way. If we kind of take something that other people don't have, so everyone who wants that thing has to come here for that, might be pretty lucrative.
Great.
Yeah. I would definitely like to see if there's a way to look into our processes.
Yeah, I agree.
Somebody wants to open a business, they call, what are we doing? Or how are we helping them? What's being offered to them, the resources available to them? And how are we presenting Lunenburg as a place that they want to operate a business? And so I don't really have a true answer to these questions here. I guess I just present it with more questions. So I'm sorry about that, but.
No, that's okay. That's why we're here. And yeah, that's definitely something that we can look into. Absolutely. Okay.
Economic Development Subcommittee. You're like, no.
On the transportation front, just a couple of questions for consideration. One, I think it was in the first public meeting that we had, there was a lot of talk about just generally expanding the availability of sidewalks and maybe even bike facilities and trying to connect different places. We have some of this information already from that meeting, but, and I guess I believe that there's fairly wide support for strategic, for strategic investments in the sidewalk and bike network where it makes sense and we can connect places. One question I was wondering, and I know the town has a pretty strong capital planning and capital improvements process already in place. I wondered, do you think there would be any support for having something akin to like a dedicated fund for capital costs that might be associated with that infrastructure?
Evan.
Yeah.
So it just so happens that we have $1.9 million sitting in Chapter 90 funds right now. That apparently, there, depends upon who you ask, there is a plan for it, but no one's really seen that plan for it. But it's just sitting there. So we have money already that could be used for this.
Okay, well, that's good. I think that's good news. It sounds like good news. The other question I wanted to ask about, and I know Rami and his team have done a lot of work in other downtowns and village centers around this too, is do you think the town would be supportive of maybe some strategic investments in pedestrian, maybe the pedestrian network in particular, but maybe also for bike safety in the village center specifically, if it meant you could gain additional sidewalk or make the crossing safer, if it meant losing some right-of-way, narrowing roads, or maybe in some cases giving up some on-street parking and either finding a location for that somewhere else or putting it in a town-owned lot or something like that. I know it is a trade-off and it can be challenging to communicate those trade-offs, but I thought this might be a good opportunity to ask you that question.
Can I counter with another question? The sidewalk thing and the mobility around the center of town, there are no sidewalks east of the middle high school fields. Those are, it's on Route 2A, it is a state road. I don't believe, and I could be wrong, and that's why I'm asking this question here, but I don't believe the town can put those sidewalks in, because it's a state road. The same would be true on Route 13, where there are a fair amount of people living in places that they would like to get out and walk around. But there's some kind of issue with sidewalks on state roads, and I don't know exactly what the deal is, but I know that we had a transportation issue with the school, and we tried to figure out if we could get sidewalks east of the school on Route 2A, and we were told that's a state road and we can't go there. So I just offer that with my question.
That's a really great point, and one that I was thinking about particularly around the town center where you have the confluence of those state routes coming together. Where, you know, in those cases, if the town doesn't have ownership or jurisdiction over those roads, which you don't, then it becomes it becomes trying to talk to and partner with, you know, the local Mass DOT district office or Mass DOT itself, which I know can be challenging. So maybe one strategy we think about as part of the master plan is like, how do you strengthen that relationship and communicate the desires through the master plan, saying, hey, we have a short/long-term plan that says this is what the town really wants. How do we do it? Can we leverage the $1.9 million or some amount of that to sort of encourage MassDOT to kind of move along with some of the plans that the town might want? So that's helpful to hear.
I think that would be a perfect time to bring in the local legislation as well. Because there's plenty of money out there for state-funded roads and road upgrades and bridge upgrades.
Yep.
And it's not too difficult, I don't think, for them to start pushing for, if we have a comprehensive plan to say, this is what we're looking to do, now get us money for it. I think that would be a time to bring in those people.
For sidewalks logistically, if we were to put in new sidewalks, where would that space come from? The road, people's property?
I know that if the state has a piece of it, you have to have a sidewalk on each side, and you have to have bike lanes, which in our small roads become ridiculous, because then there's no room for the road. But it comes off of, I believe, and somebody can tell me if I'm wrong, I've spent a little time in investigating sidewalks, it comes off of the part of the lawn of the people who are along the sidewalks, that the town has a certain amount of footage going in, I believe. I could be wrong.
I've heard the same.
Yeah, typically, they would explore using the existing right-of-way, so narrowing travel lanes, moving curb. If there's extra width, they would try to do that first. But then, there always is the option of compensating people for a part of their property. But I also recognize that, for the town to advocate for that as the solution could be politically challenging and expensive. So that would be something that we want to look at, which is one of the reasons why I asked this question in the way that I did, just about if we can borrow from the existing right-of-way by narrowing roads or thinking about reallocating on-street parking. That could be a way to potentially make up for that. But I just want to ask that sort of more broader policy question to see if that's even on the table. If it is, then we can dig a little bit deeper. If it's not, then we wouldn't.
People want sidewalks. I don't think it's, not in the question of what people want.
It's brought up constantly.
Yeah.
About how there's not enough sidewalks in the town, and that we have kids walking down to Marshall Park and not safely, and there's kids all over the center of town not safely as well. So I think there'd be pushback for sure from some people not wanting to get up their easements. But I think overall, I don't, personally for myself, I don't think there would be an issue with losing there's like 7 spots in front of Town Hall. That's not a very large amount. We don't really have any parking along any of the roads that I can think of in the center of town.
People can ride their bikes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think if we found strategic locations that would be the best for sidewalks and put good justification for them, put us in a better spot.
Excellent. Yeah, I already have through some of that public input areas for sort of priority areas that people pointed out, so we could try to look at those first. And then just the last question, when I talked with the Council on Aging during my department interviews and then in some of the public comment that we've received, it seems like transportation for older adults, and this is not a Lunenburg issue, I hear this in almost every community that I work in, but transportation options for older adults, those who either can no longer drive or don't feel comfortable driving or can't afford to drive, it's really oversubscribed right now, but it sounds like getting a second van's been really challenging. It's like there's demand, but not enough demand to justify, at least in the regional transit agency's eyes, sort of justify bringing in a second van. And I was just wondering, do you think the town would ever consider investing in like a cost sharing model with the regional transit agency, somehow not necessarily fronting the entirety of the cost, but just trying to figure out, what would it really take monetarily to get the RTA to think about providing a second van, if that's even in the cards?
I wouldn't rule it out. I think anything's a possibility, and I think the need for a second van is becoming more and more known every day, at least from what I've heard from people giving feedback to others. So I wouldn't say that it's off the cards. I think that it's a hard question right now with the budget crisis that I have found ourselves in. But I wouldn't say it's out of the...
Is this cost share, would the use be specifically for the senior center? Is that what you're asking, Eric?
It's what I'm asking, but I think if I'm reading where you might be headed, I don't think it has to necessarily be limited to it.
Because that may open up the door as a conversational piece based off of what Michael Ray was saying about a lot of these properties having no parking, but being usable if we have transportation.
Yep.
So,
yep.
If it can be related in any way, that may be a good avenue to approach it.
Okay. Yep, I totally get where you're going with that. Okay. And then just lastly, and again, some of this, well, actually, these questions weren't answered earlier. I took one off that was. One thing I had heard about when I talked to the department heads early on was not just about the buildings, which I know is obviously a huge issue and a pressing issue and a challenge, but also just that with how much population growth the town underwent over what I would consider to be a relatively short period of time, you need to also keep up with staff capacity, levels of operation and service, not just the buildings that you all have built to date and ones that you're planning on. And I just wanted to ask, I guess questions one and three kind of go together, but is there sort of a balance of the need for capital expenditures for things like the school repairs and the upgrades to the town building, if this, whatever, I'll call it the hybrid plan, but whatever it's going to be called, sort of has to be put in front of town meeting in a year or two, but then also on the operations side, just to make sure that there's staff capacity to keep up, well, I guess, to meet the needs of the current population, the aging population, and then if there is any growth in the future, just making sure that there are metrics to track that keep staff capacity moving.
Eric, we'd appreciate any solution that you can provide for any of these at this point. And I sort of say that, half kidding, half serious. I think that there is, when I read, say, number one, I don't know how we're going to ensure that we have proper staffing, knowing what we have coming down the pipeline of some major projects. I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I don't know I can't even tell you what will happen come May 4th and then the ballot a couple of weeks later on what we're doing with our current 2.5 override question that's out there. I think that in itself might start making some of these a little bit more clear, and whether or not we have to be facing the same 2.5 override question on the overall town side, not just with schools in future years. So it's for me to answer that, it's really hard because I think that there is that priority in my head of having staffing and everything else that comes with that, while also having the priority of knowing that we need to have some of these major capital projects coming down. Our elementary school is not going to be standing forever. That's not going to be optional. So, I don't know. If you have a solution for it, though, I think we'd be all ears.
Yep.
I guess I would address that there's not enough money to keep up with stuff. There just isn't enough money. And I don't know what the answer to that is. I know that, for example, in the school buildings, we could easily take $250,000 and still not be done with the maintenance that's required.
Right.
But we don't have that, so we do the best we can, and we know what happens to buildings after a while when you just do the best you can. You end up with deep trouble, but right now, this town is no different than any other small town or many towns that aren't so small in the Commonwealth, faced with major budget trouble. So, a capital plan, a balance of capital spending, I don't think we have that right now because we don't have any money to spend.
Yep. And some of this I'm asking too because the plan is going to be longer than just the next few years, so it's helpful to hear your feedback too, that in the short term, there are certain things that the town needs to figure out from a budgetary standpoint, but maybe long term, we can set some goals so that if certain things are taken care of in the short term, or fortunes change, or the state comes out with some new program, whatever it might be, that we at least have goals and strategies to take us over the next 10 or 15 years.
Evan?
For question number 2, we have a substantial stormwater issue in town. I don't think we're even close to understanding it, let alone addressing it at this point. So there's going to be a large amount of money that's going to, I think, need to be put towards that, which maybe with that $1.9 million that's kind of going towards to repair the roads from the stormwater issues. our water department, I believe, is putting forward a $32 million upgrade to one of our pumps to get filtration on there for PFAS material. So that's also going to be an issue that's coming up for, again, strapping money on the town and strapping us for cash a little bit more. So I agree with Carol that there's just no money at this point. We're trying to split hairs here for every little penny that we can get every direction.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, those are the questions I have, at least for now. This gives me really good direction, I think, for starting to put together a list of strategies that, I know Rami and I were talking about putting that list together and starting to go over that. So this is great. I really appreciate it.
Well, I liked that exercise. That was nice.
Great. That's good to hear.
We have well, first of all, do we have any other questions for Eric with RKG before we move on? Okay. We're going to move on to the presentation, but before we do that, can we take a 5-minute bathroom break for everybody? And then reconvene. So let's get back here at 8:20, if that's okay, if I can do that. Because this presentation coming up is very educational and kind of long.
I want to be here for every minute.
And you want to be here for every bit of it. So let's do that and then come back.
I'm having an allergic reaction.
Hear my own. That's not an idea. My sister put the idea in my mind. It was just me sit at home eating like ramen. Leftovers.
I wonder if we've got ours.
What time are we?
8:20, she said, it's 8:21.
Okay.
My legs are exactly the wrong length for this table. They keep like wedging.
No, I have the opposite problem. My feet don't touch the floor unless I sit way at the edge.
My favorite way, I wish like I could sit crisscross in this chair. That's what I really want to do.
Okay, is everybody back? I don't need an answer. I'm going to assume everybody's back. All right. So we have a master plan presentation from 2002, which was our last master plan. And Kim Duffy has put this together. And are you ready to go ahead and share your screen?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen.
I'm going to just listen for the next 20 minutes or however long. Okay. It's good.
All right. Let me.
Immediately back. Feet up.
Let's get snacks. Okay, so I should be sharing on a Zoom, and then also it should be displayed via the videographer. So, wonderful. Okay, Lunenburg's Master Plans Review. It's a little wordy, but I'm going to try to do my best to summarize it. So at the top of the slide, you'll see kind of a timeline of the previous master plans that Lunenburg has had. So all the way back to from 1961, 1983, 98, 2002, and then the one that is in progress right now. I found some background information probably useful for myself because I didn't join this committee until very recently. Pretty much, what is a master plan? It's a statement through text, maps, illustrations, or other forms of communication that provide a basis for decision-making regarding long-term development of the municipality. So that's kind of, brings you down to like the scope of what's happening. What goes in it, goals that are created through an interactive public process, chapters on land use, housing, economic development, natural resources, open space, services, and circulation, and then also provide some recommendations for the implementation of the plan. So from reviewing the previous master plans, kind of came up with these 3 layers of what a master plan includes, which Rami mentioned earlier in the slides that were being presented. A vision, which is what we've been doing, is what the community consensus or perception of what the town wants. Goals that are meant to attain the vision, which is kind of the step where we're at now, with figuring out, finalizing the goals, and then the policies are the guidelines and principles that are used to achieve the goals. So an interesting excerpt from the 1961 master plan I wanted to share with everybody. It says, the citizens recognize the beauty of the town and its attributes to make it a pleasant place to live. As early as 1961, the planning board articulated residents' concern to minimize the impact of residential development on the remaining rural character of the town. And since then, residential growth has continued steadily, accompanied by increasing commercial development. So the concerns that we have today that they had then are still relevant to today. So it seems like Lunenburg as a whole has kind of maintained a lot of its, thoughts on that. So we are not far from our predecessors. So this is a bit of a wordy slide, but I circled or squared out these green high-level goals, which were consistent from the 1995 to 2002, which was the most recent master plan. So these goals were to encourage economic development in town, protect natural resources, preserve rural characteristics, efficient land usage, protect natural resources, that's a duplicate, to provide quality municipal services and encourage economic development, which was also a duplicate. But it's essentially, from reviewing Rami's slides, it seems like, again, we have very similar views on what our goals will be. Underneath there are the different policies that were put into the 2002 master plan. I won't read through them. So in addition to that, in 1995, there was a refocus called Envision 2007, which was revisited again in 2002 at the most recent master plan. It outlined the mission and 4 priorities that were determined during public sessions. So the 4 priorities were to develop an active community concept, develop programs and processes to preserve Lunenburg's community character, create and develop an effective fiscal policy, and develop a plan to expand, upgrade, and maintain municipal services and facilities. So again, kind of really similar to what we're doing today, but they had it in there back in 1995. So these, like I said, these next slides will be a bit wordy, but hang in there. It's just going to dive into each of the priorities and cover a variety of objectives and actions. So don't feel the need to read through every single one. Maybe take note of a couple that might interest you or be related to like your own committee, or think about if you've seen these topics come up at your meetings or something you've worked on. But this first priority, create a community atmosphere that encourages person-to-person involvement, intergenerational activities, so objectives, pedestrian-friendly town center, we underutilize our natural recreation resources, expand the library. So those are some of the objectives, and then in the table below are the actions that they put into place to meet those objectives, which are complete the town's long-range space needs study, develop outdoor recreation facility plans. So those are kind of the tasks that they put in front of them in order to achieve this priority. So for priority 2, develop processes to preserve Lunenburg's community character. So they wanted to create outreach and educational programs to enhance awareness of land use, open space, natural resources. Devise a system for connecting greenways and trails, encourage preservation of gateways that reflect the visual character of the town. In order to do that, they recommended we promote agriculture, open space, implement the open space plan, and protect the rural towns by the rural appearance of the town by encouraging small residential subdivisions, protecting meadows, scenic easements, either through tax abatement or by gift. Priority 3, create and develop a fiscal policy. So they wanted to develop a mechanism to formulate, implement, and manage a town-wide fiscal policy. To do that, we really outlined we needed to identify current and projected future revenues, future operating expenses, big projects that the town will need to do over the next 10 to 20 years, change the method currently used to manage town fiscal affairs. So the things that they identified to do those are, create subcommittees consisting of present financial department members, seek a financial director, project the town's financial condition in order to relate expenditures to the ability to fund them. So a lot of reasonable actions here. So this also is develop a fiscal policy, but this task is to seek alternative sources for funding. So these would include the townwide needs assessment, identify funding sources, review the benefits of drawbacks of each funding to determine if they're appropriate, with the different financial committees. Plan for economic development, so their action here is to create an economic development committee, which would, determine how to foster a healthy business climate along with other factors and attract commercial and industrial enterprises to Lunenburg. Streamline operating procedures by managing and controlling costs and expenses of the town. So the objective was to provide more services or maintain the present level of services for less money, promote town-wide collaboration to work smarter and spend wiser. So it seems like they, in the past also wanted to, had the impression that we had to not have, we didn't have all of the money that we wanted to do everything. So it's more of how do we get what we want more efficiently. Develop, this priority 4, develop a plan to expand, upgrade, and maintain municipal services and facilities. So it talks about sewer systems, space needs for municipal facilities. They wanted to initiate a public transportation system, develop a townwide trash pickup service. So what they wanted to do to achieve those, create prepare a needs assessment for the public transportation system, promote community support for the for sewer facility plan, complete a 1998 space needs study. So they had a lot of actions here related to planning.
Are they responsible for the yellow trash bags?
If they are, then
can we find them?
The alternative was that every house had to arrange for their own trash pickup.
Which comparatively is very expensive.
Yes.
However, I would love to change that, all of that trash pickup situation.
If we go back to none.
I just compost everything, reuse bags, there is no more waste. That's the other option. Or a dump. All right. Create a municipal financial development plan. So again, a lot more about planning for economical spending, cost effectiveness. Provide a variety of housing in the community, provide assisted living and shared housing, provide an ability to create accessory housing. So their action here is to form a committee empowered by the planning board to research assisted living programs and shared housing plans, and review changes to an accessory bylaw that permit shared housing in one building composed of 2 units, which to me sounds like almost like a townhouse. Further develop the concept of a community center. So I want to create and maintain the community center concept. Again, multi-generational programs, seek grants, devise a budget. To do that, they just need more data, essentially is what they're saying, and encourage and provide help to committees that may seek funds for that. So seems a lot of these have to do with grants. I don't know if we have a grant writer opportunity or if we had one. Improve the town road system, broaden the plan for road improvements, conduct a needs assessment to determine safety concerns. So all of these objectives here, essentially they recommended that we initiated a study with the Capital Planning Committee, Board of Selectmen, the DPW, to assess long-term needs, improvements that we could do to increase safety, improve traffic flow, and reflects that prioritizes these different areas. Okay, that was it for all those slides. Thanks for bearing with me. So, as we went through those slides, were there a lot of actions in there that you think might have been completed? Maybe some that sounded familiar, off track, some lived in an abyss far away, never to be seen again?
The road system plan, the pavement management plan,
Yeah.
they definitely did that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, how much of this would be due? So, over under, special shout out to Fotini. She helped put together a big giant spreadsheet of all of the tasks that were created as part of this and what their current status was. Did we complete them entirely? Did we start them and kind of half done? did we not do any of them at all? And then there was also a portion that's unknown, that there just wasn't enough information to be able to formulate a result right now. But, essentially about a quarter of them were completed, so I think that's pretty good, About a third is started, and 16% completed. So about 24% is not known to have anything completed, but like if we have a worst case scenario and like unknowns completed all into lumped of none, would bring it to about 40%. So I think that's still not bad to have at least started 60% of these things that the town wanted to do in the past. And that might, especially given that, if we weren't truly like actively trying to complete all of these over other issues that came up, I'm not sure how much we really prioritized a lot of these actions. So I'm not sure, given that scenario, we did pretty well. If we were actively trying to get these done, which I don't think is the case, that might be a different story, but not too bad.
So you're saying, was there any prioritization?
I don't know.
That's unknown.
I don't think there was, because this committee doesn't really exist outside of creating the master plan, so I don't know if there's anybody managing like the tasks and trying to get them done or communicating with the rest of the boards. You're like, hey, this is what we wanted to do, this is how we thought to do it,
So my question is, I guess and we probably wouldn't know on the actual report side, so the third party that was hired to formulate the report, presenting it to the town, did they present it in a way that it was clearly prioritized? They did do that, or they did not? Or you don't know?
I don't know. The way that the report was visible to me was very confusing. But I have a few more slides, and then I wanted to kind of like reflect on ideas for maybe what we could do better this time.
Sure.
So, this next few slides will cover the specific recommendations that would help us achieve both all of the goals that they wanted. But there's a lot of words here. There's color coding and there's data, so something for everybody. So this first one starts with, I wish I could make this go away. Anyone know what do this? Oh, there we go. Okay, now I can see my whole slide. Housing implementation actions. So all of these recommendations in this table were the actions that were recommended to meet the objectives. Green were the things that were completely completed. Yellow, partial completion or started. Red, not completed at all. Gray, unknown. So that key will go through the next few slides. So there was a good amount of known data for the housing. About half the tasks were at least partially completed. A lot of where this is lacking is based on having no plans completed or created. We've done kind of work here and there, but no long-term alignment. For example, the center plan, public facilities, commercial district zoning's been updated. However, there's no additional measures to create non-residential tax revenue. So I know that's where we seem to struggle, where we need more tax revenue. But how do we do that? By not having residences, by not increasing or focusing solely on residential taxes. So economic development implementation actions. So there's about an even distribution here of known data. So there's no affordable housing provision in the subdivision bylaw. There's a property tax surcharge. We've not adopted the Community Preservation Act, which is, it allows communities to create, it's a fund to raise money through a surcharge for property taxes for open space protection, historic preservation, and provision of affordable housing. So that might have been actively decided not to, because we don't want to, implement that like tax increase, or just by passive action. But we just haven't done that. So and then also assisted living has not been promoted or given much attention to the bylaws. Oh, sorry, I think my screen was on the wrong slide. So for the economic development, let me repeat myself. So this area seems to have slightly less attention than the others. There's a lot of unknown things here. So if it's unknown if economic targets have been developed or if business needs have been addressed. But with the development of the Economic Development Committee in 2020, kind of optimistic that we'll have a lot of progress here. Is that an accurate date? That, I think you're on that board, right?
You're saying it was formed in 2020?
That's the data I was provided. So, seems
that makes sense.
Fairly, so
because I wasn't there when it was formed, and and it wasn't there that long before. That makes sense.
Yeah. So it formed, within the past 5 years or so. So we might have not had a lot of resources to really focus on this area, even though they wanted to.
I think perhaps also it was potentially with the land use director that came in to the department at the time, had a vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Open space. They had a lot of recommendations for here. Some of the things that were completed were maintenance plans for conservation areas, encourage use of the trails. Some in progress are, the facilities areas. So it's mostly due to the plan for Marshall Park, and the other trails are being maintained by Conservation Commission. These aren't completed yet though. And then there's an active engineering study, actually just from recently, 2023, for the areas in the parking for the different, at Cowdrey, for example, or other parks areas. Some of the areas that haven't been addressed, the wetlands protection plan in addition to the bylaw. So we do have the bylaw, but there's no plan. Boat ramps, wish I had more context behind that. And then establish purpose for zoning districts. Community facilities and services. So a good amount with the number that's here, that's done and in progress. It's the second time we're seeing in this is the town center plan, and now we're seeing a school plan. So really what I'm seeing from this is a trend that we kind of don't create plans, but we just do bits and pieces as we go. For example, the library was built in 2024, middle high school 2016, primary school 2006, Turkey Hill, but we're all doing these little bits and pieces, but no plan. So that's the trend that I'm seeing from this data. Almost done. Circulation implementation actions. So this has had a lot of focus, a lot of focus. So a lot of things are done, a lot of things are in progress. Like I said, the streets and the roadways have had a lot of focus. There's a lot of other opportunities as well. There's a walkability and a parking study done, but I don't think we've, really been able to implement anything from that. So that was 2019. So we have that.
The flashing lights as you cross here?
Yeah.
That's from that.
Oh, very good.
There's been a fair amount implemented from that.
Oh, okay. Learned something there. The study also identified, public parking needs, which we know of. But these unknown ones that I have down here, really, I feel like they show a lot of potential reduction in traffic, potentially, sign regulations, because if we want to maintain a rural kind of town, I feel like that's pretty low hanging fruit, just to make some signage bylaws. If people need to make new signs, just make them in this way.
There's been something recent with MART where they do help with residents that are not elderly. Because I know some school kids have been able to call Mart to pick them up and bring them home when they stay for practice or whatever. I don't know what the specifics are, but there's been something done with that.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll let that down. Okay. So those are all the actions and kind of the state of where we are. A lot's been done, a lot's in progress, and there's quite a few things that are also not completed. But like I said before, I don't know if there was really any active wanting to make these changes, any maintenance. A couple of interesting contents that I found from the master plan. They had consultant companies come in to project population to, kind of plan for build out. Some of them were really, really high. I'm just surprised that they thought maybe we'd have a population of 28,000, 27,000. You could only imagine what problems we would have then. So just wanted to add that fun tidbit in. What I also found interesting is the population. I'm curious maybe what the population is now comparatively. So maybe that's something we could also work into our master plan, rate of change and what that is, because that's an important piece to know. And I know we've been collecting data on that. Also back in 2002, the majority of the employed residents worked within 10 miles of the town. And I know from one of the very early presentations that I think that point was looked into a bit more of how far, where people travel. Yeah, it's definitely shifted. So interesting things to note. Also the projection for build out, I just have these red squares highlighted of how much they had in terms of different recreational activity space and how much they kind of projected out that we would need. And I think we've gotten lucky that maybe not, that our population hasn't increased as they might have anticipated, because just for example, like the indoor recreation centers, we had 0.91 acres of school gyms and they wanted us to have 23 acres of school. So it's just, I mean, that one was a little unrealistic, because how do you have a gym that big? But like community parks. So we had Marshall Park, 30 acres-ish, and they anticipated we needed 80 acres. So it's a huge increase, but we didn't have to meet that. So this is just a little more interesting contents that that I found in the master plan, titled "They Were Concerned Then, We're Still Concerned Now." So I highlighted in purple just kind of major sentiments that they held. Developments affected the character of the town. When housing prices began to rise, near the cities, this town was attractive to home buyers seeking quality housing in a small town setting. They were then starting to see several large-scale housing developments, large areas of undeveloped land rezoned and cleared for commercial use. I don't know about our zoning process, if there's opportunity to say no, or how that would turn out. There's the scenic views was affected. So again, a lot of the same sentiments that we share now. So it just kind of continues on. Then we are very near the end. So this was the kind of the opportunity that I had for what could we do better this time. And I wasn't sure if anyone had any ideas. I know it's been a long evening. Because if not, I put some up that I thought of earlier in the day when I had more brain energy.
I think that the town needs to have, and I know I saw a lot of committees on there. It's always like, oh, throw a committee at it and solve the problem. Mm-hmm. But, and I'm not really pushing that we format an entirely new committee, but I think the committee chairs need to be in a committee for more communication and thorough actionables and efficiency. Mm-hmm. There's such a huge lack of efficiency and teamwork. I mean, so, and I mean every single committee, not just like the things that we think should go together, like economic development and parks and whatever else, and the green communities. That would make sense, but like we need to expand that to every single committee. And that would be a very large group of people, but imagine how efficient everything would be if it was literally just us coming together and providing a report on what is happening in our committees. Not even really to problem solve, but to just provide a report. Because I mean, I know the information's available and there's open meeting law and everything needs to be published, but I'm a mother that owns 2 businesses and I serve on all of these committees and I actually don't have time to watch everything or to read all of the minutes. But if there was a way to streamline it and we meet at this location this time and we have like 1 minute each to put our spiel out there, I think a lot of these things would probably come to completion, or we'd be able to partner with people that could help us bring these items to completion.
Yeah, I completely agree. There needs to be more cross-communication between the different committees. Because, yeah, people don't know what's happening over there. People are trying to replicate the same effort.
Yeah, you can't just create a committee and say, okay, go figure it out, because there could be like 20 things in the way that you're focusing on solving that these other people know that you actually can't do that because here's why, and you'll never know that. But you'll spend a lot of time trying to figure it out, and that's where a lot of people get burnout, and that's why we don't have volunteers, and that's why people aren't fulfilled. So, efficiency. That's what I would put on there. I know it's like a really simple thing, but stop throwing committees at it and actually enforce some communication.
Small now.
And maybe from this particular master plan that we're all collectively working on, it seemed like there wasn't a clear priority list for these. So like, all right, we have 5 things that cost $5 million. We're probably not going to do all of them. What does the collective want most?
Absolutely, I agree. I saw that as well. I'm like, here's a whole, they put so much in there. There's so many objectives, so many recommendations, and like, yeah, it's great to have all of that in there, because they did the work. You might as well document it for future selves. But yeah, there's no priority list of like, these are the things that we really want the most, and maybe an analysis of like, this is easier to do, low money. This is maybe like a bigger thing, but it's like higher impact and something that you'll get back in return, like higher return on investment, higher, higher investment initially. So that kind of layout I would really like to see, and fewer things that we actually want to do that are realistic.
I would like to see more data on, so we're hearing the voices for the people now, but how do we make the future better even if we're not around to see it? I don't really know how to put that into something a little clearer, but when we're talking about sidewalks and bike lanes and sustainability, that's what we actually need. We only literally have so much earth. And it like makes me cringe whenever we think of, oh, we'll just add more parking. It's like, it bothers me because we're making it flat and black and hot and nothing's gonna grow there for a very long time, even after we remove it. and that's like a single-use done thing. So we only have so much earth. Is that really what we want to do? I know that it would be perfectly awesome to have like parking for us right now so that we can have a gathering place. But do we want to take that earth away from generations down? And how is our decisions right now going to impact 5 generations down?
I think I captured it, keeping the future in mind, sustainable projects that are long-term worthwhile.
A master plan process takes a very long, I think we're supposed to do it every 10 years?
10 years.
And the last one was in 2002. Like, the 10-year thing is not regulated. What we're doing now is gonna have to last for a very long time, like for when my daughter's an adult. So what are we gonna do for her? That's how I wanna approach this. What are you gonna do for your grandkids? What are you gonna do for your children if you have any? Like, what are we gonna do for them? Because it's not just for us for however long we're gonna live here.
So the thoughts that I had from earlier, and I said I had more brain cells, I put up here on the screen. So the first one, which is really funny because you were like, oh yeah, no more committees. Maybe it doesn't have to be a subcommittee, but some sort of management, some sort of management of the implementation recommendations. So however method we do that, whether it's with the chairs coming to me and somebody, is there to keep this part in mind. Like if we continue the steering committee on like a smaller scale, just have it be kind of like a permanent kind of volunteer committee that can keep this stuff in mind. Like it's not going to be like a full-time we need to do necessarily all these things, but it's just to manage like, hey, this is what we wanted to do and try to coordinate between the boards. So that was really the purpose of that, but we don't have to do a subcommittee. And then that would lead to this this middle top one here, increased awareness to other committees, boards, commissions of the master plan outcome. Because again, I don't know if we were really actively trying to do these things. People may not have known about it. We don't really have anyone to ask that, but never hurts to have people be aware of what these things did. We did all this work, so let's get it done. This one is a little bit selfish of me, electronic upload versus a scan of a paper document. I don't know what their technology was back in 2002, but it was just an upload of a paper document, so I had to like convert it to PDF or to convert it into Word and stuff, so it was not user-friendly. So keeping in mind of our future selves, I don't know what the method that it's going to be for this. I don't know if we need to have it be a paper copy.
You do have to have, the town would have to have in its records a paper copy.
Okay.
But they don't have to make paper copies. They can give people PDFs.
Yeah. Or like have the one be available online, be like the online version, and then have the paper copy on hand. Yeah. To make the recommendations that we do end up making in the long term maybe more effective, I was thinking we could organize them by like which board they fit into. They did that in the last master plan. Is a little bit, but I think we could make it better, just to try to help us actually get them done, of like who needs to be involved in this. Visual representation of ideas, so no town center, big topic. What do we want that to look like? It can be a rough sketch, or maybe other ideas, because right now like text, it was a lot of text. Sometimes pictures say a million words. High resolution color photos and maps. We want to make sure whatever we put in there for maps and pictures is really clear, because it was not in the past version. It's more electronic stuff. Quick links. If people want to like go to this certain thing, it goes right there. This bottom center one, prioritize based on money, time, resources. It's what I was alluding to earlier about how another way to organize the recommendations is based on how much money they'll take, how much time it'll take to do it, what resources we have, as well as limit the recommendations, and then more frequent master plan revisions and updates. So we can do the whole like master plan every 10 years or so, but maybe every 5 years we want to go and like just revisit it. We have to do like a whole upgrade, but there were in that first library, I had like the timeline. Some of those were minor, like revisitations. They weren't whole rewrites. So I think if we do that more frequently, it wouldn't be such a daunting task to do it every 20 years. And that way it would also help us, because if we did fewer recommendations per time, we could, focus better and then be able to move on in 5 years or so. So, super fun stuff. Thanks for bearing with me.
You good?
Yeah, that was it.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
That was very helpful. Okay, does anybody tuning in online have any questions or any remarks about this before we move forward? All right, we're all mentally starting to check out, not because of Kim's presentation, but because of
You
the
had
time.
to read that master plan. Like this was exciting compared to that. So.
Your presentation was great.
Thank you for putting it all together, Kim. It's
yeah.
really appreciated.
All right, let's stick with it for a little bit longer here. We're going to go to the May 30th Plan Lunenburg public meeting, discuss locations. So I had reached out to the senior center about using the pavilion.
That's a good idea.
I reached out to the maintenance director, I think. I don't really know his title. If Karen was here, she could probably tell me. His name is Chad, in the Ritter building. But I spoke with him about, hey, who do I speak to about using the TC Passios and organizing all of that. He actually suggested using the pavilion at the senior center. I looked into that. They're going to be closed, which that's a great idea for the future. I think for now, that's as far as I took that, because I do have an okay from Smokestack if we want to go back to the original venue and just make the decision to have it there. I'm ready to put all of my eggs in that basket because there's seating already. It's indoors if it rains. There's food, there's drinks. We don't have to worry about getting sponsors for catering, all of that. And there's a kids area inside for making it accommodating to young families with kids. I did look into other options, but it just wasn't aligning. So if we have any objections, now's the time to let me know.
I think Smokestacks checks off all the boxes that we needed.
Okay. Do we have any comments from those watching about having it at Smokestack Coffee Roasters?
Nope.
Okay. Everybody likes coffee and pastries, so I figured that would be the case. And thank you very much to Smokestack for being willing to let us use that space. I do think that the first meeting there was a good success, and everybody was thankful to have a snack and a beverage during. So we'll move forward with that. I did also want to note, because we did have a comment that it wasn't a municipal building and to have a public meeting there, it doesn't, so I'm told, doesn't actually matter. You post it like any other meeting. It is wheelchair accessible, so it checks off that box. It has enough parking. Those are the only things. So I did get a couple comments from people that were aware of our first meeting there that approached me regarding that, but it's okay as long as we post it just like any other town meeting, which we do intend to do. So I will reach out to her and we'll have it there for May 30th. And Rami, do we want to do 6 o'clock? Is that okay with you?
If that works for you all, it works for us, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I reached out to a woman at the schools to ask what time frame typically works best for families, and 6 o'clock was the time she gave, so I'm fine sticking with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will reach out to them. So we're gonna do smokestack at 6 PM, May 30th.
We're gonna talk about what we're going to do there.
Hmm?
Are we gonna talk about what we're gonna do there? Like how we, like what activities or goals or?
It's, so we're launching the survey the end of this month to have it ready and available for May 4th, where we'll launch it publicly to everybody there. And the May 30th will be when we have collected that information and are able to present it. And that's where, Rami, if you want to come in and share your goals for that event.
So I think that's, you know, the idea of the survey is to sort of elicit a long list of recommendations or potential recommendations. This will be our first opportunity to sort of test those out and figure out what, you know, at least the group that comes, what they like and don't like. From there, kind of the idea would be that becomes our sort of long list of recommendations that over the course of the summer we test and kind of visualize, and then come back in the fall for more evaluation from the community through the fourth survey.
So how will what we discuss at the meeting be different from the survey people are going to take? Or will it be different?
I think the hope is that everyone who participates in the survey will have I will have a list of ideas. They're probably not going to be the same from everyone, so it's an opportunity for everyone who comes to sort of look at and discuss the total list, and to sort of weigh in on those. What you won't be doing during the survey is seeing a total list. Right? You'll be asked to make recommendations of your own.
Okay,
So typically what happens in person, from what I've seen, is that, so you take the survey, you come, and yeah, it would be real easy to log in online and then to see a totaled answer of what people, a graph. But these in-person events are a little more, because then you're gathering a lot of people together, and Rami and his team provide a lot of exercises to get people talking to each other, which is very important, because it's exactly what we're trying to do, is build a community and listen to everybody. And so usually what happens is the group of people, either, you know, sectioned off or all together accumulated, tend to come up with ideas or discussions that weren't on the survey or weren't even talked about, that we hadn't even thought about before. So that seems to be the overall goal, is to gather a little bit more. It's not just all about the survey. The survey is also a means to motivate and to get people there to go a little deeper with that.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
No, that's very well put, much more articulate than I am at 9 o'clock on a Friday evening. So thank you. I would say the exercises will ask the groups through kind of different games, if you will, to prioritize a set of recommendations, to try to thematize the recommendations, to kind of organize them in different ways that tease out where the community is heading, what they really think are good ideas. I mean, there's a game we do sometimes where you, or an activity where you kind of have a certain amount of money and you're asked to sort of, you spend it accordingly. And part of that is helpful because makes people realize that there is a finite amount of money. So really what the priorities out there are, sometimes we'll do things like where you sort of, we did this a little bit the last time, we put ideas, place ideas on a map. One we haven't done yet that I think could be useful is sort of to what I'm calling thematize. If you're really interested in housing, here's a can brainstorm for 5 minutes about different things, or 15 minutes about different ways we could tackle this topic. So those sorts of things that get, as you said, Josie, get a little deeper than a survey might be able to, a little more nuanced.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I just based on feedback that I've received about other, events that, have been held, I would just caution against doing anything that seems like it would be a repeat of the survey, to have continued people coming. Those other activities, I think, would be probably the best thing to do, instead of just rehash like, oh, these are my priorities. Like, I already said my priorities. So that's just would be my word of caution for continued involvement. That we want meetings to be like as the meetings, like the events, to be as worthwhile and make people want to come back. And talking to other people, like, I find value in that, but some people might not. They just want to get it done. So.
And that's where maybe adding more of a description to the event may be helpful. It's like, it's not just going over the results of the survey. We actually need you to show up and then take it to another level. You said what you said, now explain yourself, and let's like try to get this, be a part of it more. And so that's exactly what this committee is designed for, is to, Rami and his team put together a lot of information and things that we can't really even begin to do, but what we can do is reach our communities. And so that's what and what you're talking about, making it seem like it's not just the survey. Yeah, definitely. But this committee right here, that's our job, is to tell people why it's different. And
if we could include more of like why it's different and what the goals are, and then what the outcome will be. It would be helpful.
So I think I'm trying to think how to do this, because I think one of the things that'll be super helpful at the May 4th town meeting will also be to kind of advertise that this event is happening at the end of May. So maybe, Josie, I can work with you about creating a flyer that ticks all the boxes here, with a sort of small description of the event and as well as the place, date, and time.
Sure. Okay. Before we move on, do we have any other questions about the May 30th Plan Lunenburg event? Rami, I think we spoke about it briefly last time, but on May 4th, are you going to be there in the physical with a table handing out QR codes for the survey and pamphlets, or what exactly does that look like for you?
I didn't think I was going to be. I think I could be if you need me there, but it wasn't on my agenda. But if it's helpful to have if you guys think it's helpful for us to physically be there at the table, we can be there.
You want to tag team?
I was going to say I'll be there anyways, because we're going to plan to hand out flyers for green communities.
Okay. And I'll be there. And Rami, that can be another thing that you and I talk about, is what exactly we can hand out. I don't think that you need to be there but maybe, provide me with information that you want expressed. Now comes the time of the day where I start slurring my words.
And we have all the branding for the table.
Sure.
So we can.
Evan, you have your hand up?
Do we want to also consider having a table set up on the 18th of May for the local election as well? I don't know if we have the ability to do that in the alcove of TCP before you get into the gym. That would probably be a question for our select board member. But it would be another instance where we'll have a slightly different group of people there, and potentially, and probably more people there than we will at town meeting. Although this year, who knows?
So, Evan, what was your specific question to me?
Is there anything stopping us from having a table to hand out QR codes or surveys at town election in the vestibule area of TCP?
I actually don't know the answer to your question, but I can find out.
Okay.
I mean, I think the only official prohibition about, within that radius there is any kind of campaign-related material, but
right.
I don't know about this other aspect, but I can inquire. And we'll do so. This might also be a good time to remind the group, I don't want to shift gears too much, but that by the time this May 30th meeting happens, I will no longer be on this committee as a voting member. I'm here as a member of the select board. So, you're going to have another person in here, and maybe think about who you want me to start cajoling into replacing me from the select board. So,
Tell Caesar to do it. He's young and energetic.
what's that?
I said, tell Caesar to do it. He's young and energetic.
Second.
I'm semi-young, but way less energetic.
Okay, so Lou, if I can give you some homework, definitely find out who's gonna be your replacement on the master plan committee when that happens,
Yeah. I'll
in all
start.
seriousness.
Okay. All right.
All right, do we have anything? So May 14th is a research opportunity, it sounds like, Evan.
May 18th.
18th.
18th, yes. Thank you, everybody. All right, and then I'll coordinate with Rami about May 4th. And then anything else about May 30th or that event before we move forward? Okay. We're gonna move on to the location of the town display. I was hoping Matt Brenner would be here to weigh in on this. And I'm not even really, I know it says location of town display discussion, but I'm not even really asking for a discussion tonight. More of, as we go tonight, consider where we could put a 4x8 aerial town map permanently. Considering that it can't be made weather tight for outdoor placement, it probably doesn't make sense to be vertical because it's so big and you want to be able to walk around it and look at it. So where could that go that's accessible for town residents to enjoy and to be educated? We're talking about the display.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there any space in the historical building?
I don't know.
You draw people in there, but that's also relevant. I thought the library was a good idea.
Yeah, I thought Matt was very excited about the library. Do we know if
So
anything?
Does it
I
have space?
spoke with the director there, and he said if it was multi-use, that could open up more opportunities, but a lot of his comments were if this then that type, if it could be made weatherproof and be put outside, there are options around the building, but it cannot be. if there was a way to incorporate it into an already existing table, if there was a way to put a tabletop over it with chairs around it that they could use as an additional seating place, but it needs to be multi-use if it's going to be in there. And then additionally, they can't agree to house it forever.
Right.
Because there's only so much space. So those are things to consider as we have these meetings, so Rami and his team can stop holding on to it and setting it up. And
Well, I figured we'd have to do that anyways. It just occurred to me, would it make any sense for me to speak directly to the director, the library director, because I might...
Yes, it would make perfect sense.
Okay, all right.
I don't know what it's made out of. I think Matt has a lot on his plate right now. But I've brought that conversation about as far as I can bring it with the library director. Every time I leave, I have more questions, so.
I'm happy to, I think I might be able to answer some of the questions.
Yes.
And sort of brainstorm with him about some ways it could work.
I think that would streamline the process, or at least definitely shut the library door, so we have to look elsewhere. So, yeah, that would be helpful.
You mentioned vertical. Why wouldn't that work?
Because it would be 8 feet tall. I don't really know anybody that tall that can.
Oh, like to see
To
it.
look at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. Step stools.
Step stools.
It's also would be pretty heavy, so there's the sort of structure you need to make sure it stays upright.
A lot went into making it as detailed as it was for the hopes of people being able to walk around it and to be able to see the detail. Anyways, is there anything else on that before we move forward? I know we're gonna have a lot of what?
I have a different idea.
Okay.
Could we incorporate it into the floor?
Ooh.
Then it doesn't take up any space and everybody can see it.
That is cool. That it would be very cool. I don't know how that would happen. That is a great idea.
Impressed with 9:30 at night.
9:30.
Like, well, I can't put it on the wall. Floor. I don't know. Maybe
Floor would be cool. But I don't know. Yeah. So we'll see how that conversation with the library goes. If not, Kim and I are going to break into a municipal building with a saw and put it on the floor. That was a joke. Okay.
And the joke, yeah.
Anyways. Okay, does anybody else have anything to add to the display? We're going to move on to committee comment. Any committee comment? Great news, everybody. Thank you for not having a comment. I'm ready to leave. We're going to move on to adjournment.
Do we need the motion to adjourn?
Yes.
I'll move to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, and then we're going to do roll call from here at the end.
Aye.
And with your name.
Oh, Carol Ashambo, aye.
Kim Duffy, aye.
Tim Willismer, aye.
Josie Gilchrist, aye. Those on
Evan
Zoom?
Waters, aye.
Lou Franco, aye.
Jerry Reed, aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
We got a lot accomplished.
Thank you.
Thank you, good night.